Call to order for, hello? Okay. Call to order for a Watertown City Council work session for December 11th, 2023. Finance Officer Bob Zine, please call the roll.
Okay, Peters,
Here.
Shuddy,
Here.
Tupper,
Here.
Bueller, absent, Danforth,
Here.
Pauline,
Here.
Jurens.
Here.
Thank you.
Quorum is established. Just like to point out that Councilman Peters is online. Councilman Beeler is excused. Chair will entertain a motion to approve today's agenda. Motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Shuddy. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. All right, we're on to regular agenda. Item A is a discussion on resolution establishing fees for city licenses, permits, administration memberships, user fees, and other miscellaneous items. Finance Officer Bob Zine, please illuminate us.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. This will be coming forward to the council at the next council meeting, but we did want to have some discussion. Just as we do every year, it's the opportunity for the departments to look at the fees that they charge and then to change them. What you're seeing in front of you has been part of the budget for 2024. So some of these revenues are planned. I will let some of the departments speak if the council has questions. I will say that there was adjustments pretty much across the board in every department. Nothing big, but just some minor increases. So if there's specific questions, I'll answer them. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Finance Officer. Just in general, so basically across the board, inflationary hikes to the permitting and licensing. That's pretty much very easy summarization to that. City Manager Mack, did you want to add anything?
No, sir.
All right. We'll open it up for council discussion. Actually, I'm going to break from protocol a little bit. We had some citizens of Watertown who have taken the time out of their schedule to come and listen in on the deliberations, and I think it's only fair, since we know that they are concerned about this and they have taken the time, that we will allow them to have testimony at a work session, even though that's not necessarily anything that we have to do. But I want to always respect the will of the people when they show up to take interest in their governance. So we know that the one issue of contention would be the cannabis licensing. And that would be where we would discuss it right here, right?
Correct. Yeah, typically we wouldn't have a separate discussion about the fee schedule at a work session unless you all had requested it. But knowing that you had wanted to have the discussion about the renewal fee for cannabis licensing, that's why it's here in front of you tonight. Our city attorney and our finance office has done a good job of compiling information from around the state. So if you have specific questions about what other communities are doing, we can do our best to answer that. We do have it programmed into the 2024 fee schedule as it is currently at the $25,000 for the renewal rate. So if you were going to make any changes, you wouldn't need to take formal action on that tonight. We would just take that direction and plug it in to the resolution for next Monday.
All right, thank you very much. So I will allow some public testimony here when it comes time for council deliberation. And the reason why I'm doing this is we knew that this was coming up. We had been approached as a council, as a body, and individuals, and as city staff, that this is an issue that those who own the licenses wanted to discuss, and they are the ones who are largely here to talk about that in front of council. So knowing that, not to say that any of the other licensing and, nothing else in this is not worthy, but we know that this is going to happen. So I would open it up for anyone who would like to come forward and address the council. Just a second. I want to make one thing clear as well. We're not voting on this today. We're voting on it a week from today. So, Councilman Danforth?
Yeah, Kristen, did you say that we had the fee schedule in front of us? Because I don't.
Yeah, it was attached to the agenda. Do you need a copy? I will get one.
I'm sorry, I apologize. And the reason why I asked that, I apologize for not.
Actually, should I just take it? Well, are you looking at the other the other licenses and,
Well, the reason, Mayor, is that there may be some, as we talk about the renewal here, there may be some cross-reference over to liquor licenses and things there. I would maybe think that might occur,
okay.
because I might be doing that.
While we are getting some of that information, how about I open it up for discussion on, from council on any of the other fees, licenses?
What are they, Mayor?
Councilman Jurens?
When you say inflation, are you talking 5%, 10%? What was generally, I haven't seen the list,
City Manager Mack?
where they were and where they're going.
Generally, they're about 3%. Some of them haven't changed at all year over year. That's a better question for the individual departments if you've got, specific questions about that. It was attached to the agenda, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually just looking it over, which I had. It looks like it's raising just marginally, if at all, in most areas. Finance
I
officer?
can cover just like the finance. So a lot of our license renewals were $50. Just with the cost of kind of doing business, we have shown an increase to 75 for most all of the business license renewals. And then, so that's kind of our across the board. One change that we did also make, and this will depend on the taxi cab ordinance, we might have to have a different discussion. But for the taxi cab, we did increase that from $50 for a company to $200. And the only reason for that is because with all the background checks and all the paperwork that it takes to get those processed, $50 just really wasn't enough. Now that would be for the renewal, and then each driver went from 50 to 100 for their first year, and then just the normal 75 renewal. And there again, that's just the paperwork that goes behind all of those, background checks and stuff like that, so. So, yeah, yep, and that would depend on, we have some suggestions for the taxi cab ordinance that you'll see on Monday, so.
And I can also attest, like, a few things that the public might be interested in. Golf course membership fees, wellness center membership fees, Bramble Park Zoo. As a member of all of those that pay my bill, and I pay my bill every year, it looks like it's about the same price than what I'm used to paying. Councilman Tupper?
Finance Officer Bob Zine, when you talk about the first time, like on a taxi cab driver, it's $100, is that what you said? And then renewal would be,
It's currently 50, the proposed is to bring it to 200 for the company,
but per driver, I
100 for
guess.
the driver, yep,
And then following would be 75.
yep, and a $25 to transfer.
My biggest question is, do we do a background check on them every year or
No.
no?
Nope.
One time, okay.
Any other conversation on the other fees? And Finance Officer Bob Zine, did you get the information that was asked, or is that getting printed up? It's printed. Okay. Well then, if there's no further discussion on the other fees, let's start with public testimony. I ask that you just come forward, cite your name and who you are representing.
Thank you, council members. My name is Mitchell Kane. I am the attorney that works and helps basically with Dakota Dispensaries here in Watertown. Some of you have seen me before here in this same room. And basically, I would defer a lot of what we have to say here today to the letter that was submitted to the council here on the, I believe, past couple weeks. But basically, we're asking that the licensing fee be decreased substantially based off of what 2023 and 2024 look like. As I hope the council can remember back in 2021, I believe, when basically this law was passed, the council was struggling with the idea of the recreational aspect of the use of cannabis. And as we sit here today, recreational cannabis is still prohibited in the state of South Dakota. As cited in the letter, only approximately 1% of the South Dakota population has access to medical cannabis. And with the $25,000 licensing fee, especially the renewal, that makes it very difficult for our dispensaries to be able to sustain their business operations. As of November of this year, all of the dispensaries will have made 3 payments of $25,000, many of which, and I'll have Roger help me on this, but many of which weren't even able to purchase product from the state pursuant to our laws and regulations until this last year. So it's been a heavy upfront cost to own and operate these dispensaries without the ability to realize basically the sustainability of the profits that the council was once mulling over when we were discussing recreational. And so as the mayor referenced earlier, with the help of Lisa Carrico and some other individuals, when you take a look at our letter and basically our surrounding municipalities, Watertown kind of stands out. Pretty much every other city in our state has a $5,000 or less renewal fee, aside from Sioux Falls and Deadwood. And as explained in that letter, much of that is attributed to, 1, the size of Sioux Falls, and 2, the gaming, and I believe Sturgis is at $7,500 for the gaming and the rally in those specific municipalities. But for Watertown, we're 5 times every other city. And truthfully, I don't know if that, again, was the intention of this council a couple years ago when we were before you addressing the licensing fee and the renewal fee with the anticipation of recreational marijuana being passed by law. And so that's why, kind of as cited again in the letter, we sort of have this obverse issue. The council was once addressing a problem with, we're going to have too many dispensaries, or we're going to have too many individuals with sort of access to this, to recreational marijuana, and the problems that could arise therefrom. And those problems haven't come to light, basically, since Amendment A was struck down by our Supreme Court. And so it creates this obverse issue of, are there constitutionality problems? And that's, again, referenced below or inside the letter. But basically that now with the $25,000 renewal fee, is that creating too much of a burden on our dispensaries from a constitutional standpoint as it affects the due process clause and the commerce clause? Basically, our citizens by majority voted for the passage of medicinal marijuana, and the imposition of a $25,000 renewal fee when based off of, or when taking a market calculation looking at the state's recommended amount and surrounding cities, is that too much? So we're basically here today to ask that Watertown kind of, I don't want to use the word conform, but to consider here today and at next week's meeting to decrease that fee, at least for now. I mean, again, this fee could be revisited at some other time upon the passage of recreational marijuana. And if the council is, again, worried about concerns that we discussed a couple years ago, but at least for now, to decrease it to a number that is more manageable for these dispensaries. And Roger, I don't know if you want to.
Would you please spell your last name for me?
Koehn.
Koehn. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Roger Meyer, co-owner of Dakota Dispensaries, and 3 years ago, or a little over 2, I guess it is, we have different faces on the city council, and we all had no understanding of the medical marijuana business whatsoever. We had no idea what the cost of some of the things that were gonna be. I don't think any of us did. It's been a learning experience for all of us that are in the industry. And the $25,000, when we started out, did not look that bad. But then once we entered into the business, and the lack of amount of card holders, the amount of business you're doing daily is just very, very expensive. It costs almost $500 a day to open up your door of a dispensary. It is, the metric system that we hooked up with the state of South Dakota is $600. Banking fees, they charge us $800 a month to have a bank account to put our own money, and they take $4 off of every 1,000 we deposit. So everyone really has seemed like they've had their hand out since the start of this. And you know, what we're really looking at is to be able to have affordable products for our customers and clients of medical marijuana cards. And at the rates that it's set right now, we have $75,000 invested in this license, and we've been open for, what, 8 or 9 months now. You know, the first year, we had no product to sell at all. The first year, it came in slowly, you know, so we're in the beginning process of this business. And we really just think the 25,000 is just kind of unfair when you look at the cost of doing other licenses.
All right, thank you very much. I will ask one question. So you're disputing the renewal fee, not necessarily the upfront initial charge?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other public testimony?
All right. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Council. I'm Bob West, co-owner of Dispensary of Watertown. RBCX LLC is the corporate owner there. Here actually to add on a little bit to what they said, but I'd also like to protest the application fee from the jump. I think that's too high as well. I think it should fall in line with a much lower registration fee. And really, to elaborate on that, we look at our dispensary business, which has been open since September of last year. We would love the opportunity to vertically integrate, which would mean opening a cultivation and or a manufacturing facility. But to do that, especially on a small scale, which is how we started our dispensary, with our own funding, not any outside funding or any big loans, to do that in Watertown would be economically unviable. We would be way too far behind, which is why we haven't even pursued it at this point. But in a cultivation, you're essentially operating for 6 months up to a year before you have a product that you can sell, because of the build out and then the growth cycle of the plant itself. So that amount of time plus the incredible application fee, which would actually stand for a cultivation and a manufacturing, that joint ability is something that marijuana cultivators should enjoy. It's something that a lot of farmers take advantage of. It essentially having the manufacturing allows you to process all of the product that you grow, even if it's not up to the customer standard for where you could sell it in your dispensary. You could manufacture that and turn it into a gummy or a vape or another viable product that you could sell. All that being said, the fee of what we'd be looking at, $75,000 application for all three, and $75,000 a year, it just makes it impossible to even consider here in Watertown. To piggyback a little bit on what they said, I think it's important that we look at the other cities. If we look at Aberdeen, a bigger city, maybe a similar trade area, they have 2 open dispensaries. They've had 2 or 3 licenses given back to the city because those businesses deemed it unviable for them to open. If you look at Brookings, South Dakota, they allow, I think, 4 or 5 licenses. They have 1 active dispensary. Multiple licenses have been given back to the city. In Watertown, I think you have something unique. You have 3 local operators. The other 2 owners I know are local. My wife and I graduated Watertown High. My wife and I just moved back here from Las Vegas for this business. And I think that's really the only reason you have 3. You have 3 local entities that want to see this industry thrive. And, you know, we paid the fees, but it's excessive. And like I said, for for expansion and for the future, we'd definitely like to see not only the renewal fee lowered, but also the application fee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. West. Anyone else?
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Council, I'm going to ask that we stay on this topic for right now, and let's have some discussion about the fee for the medical marijuana dispensaries. Councilman Tupper.
Just to clarify Mr. West's comment that there is only 3 dispensaries in town, and that's one of the reasons that they were local. That is the limit that we did cap them on is 3 also. I know there was a lot of controversy when that came up. I was a huge supporter of limiting it. A lot of people didn't want to limit it. I felt, especially in the very beginning, that it needed to be limited. That is one reason I feel that the fees were set the way they were, because we were willing to limit it. How many did you say were in Aberdeen?
There are 2 open.
How many licenses do they?
I believe there are 5.
5, so. That's part of my belief of why the fees were set the way they were. Not saying that, we still don't need to look at them, but I think we did a good job of trying to protect the people that were interested in by limiting the licenses, so.
I'd agree with that.
Any further discussion? Councilman Danforth.
I'm trying to find in here, how much is a liquor license, a full liquor license renewal? I can't seem to,
It's located under finance. Retail on-sale liquor is $1,500 annually,
so if
$1,500.
I go in the bar, that's what that is? That type of
Yes,
license, full
for
liquor
liquor,
license?
yep, on
Okay,
sale,
1,500.
yep.
Okay, may I ask a question, Finance Officer, please?
Yes.
If I want one of those licenses, how do I get one?
Are you talking liquor license?
Liquor licenses now, and this will trail back over,
Okay.
I assure you. How do I get one of those licenses now?
So currently, there are no liquor licenses available in the city that would be sold from the city.
Okay.
They're all currently owned, so anybody that wants to get a liquor license would have to seek out someone who already owns it and purchase it from them,
Okay.
which the city's not part of. We just facilitate the transfer of the license.
And are you familiar at all with some of the most recent exchanges and the sale of those licenses to other parties, what those costs have been?
I believe when we went back and we did the restaurant on sale, that's when we first kind of allowed for that $100,000 one. Based off of the 100,000, we did have a few that were willing to submit what their license was valued at. They had just purchased them. It was probably around the 200 to 225,000.
And
Is
that's
what
what I
their value
recall as
was.
well. Okay, so in the case of these licenses, technically we say they own them, but do they really own them? That's really a question, because they pay a fee, they don't buy, there's no charge for the license other than the filing fee initially, and then a renewal fee. And they can't transfer them. So my question is, do they really own them? And I'm not necessarily pointing to you, but I'm trying to get some clarification, understanding of what they really have.
Now, on this question, are you talking the liquor license?
No, now
Or
I'm talking.
now you've moved on to the medical marijuana.
Now I'm
so
transferring over to the point of discussion.
Okay.
So I know what can happen with all the liquor licenses now, and I know historically what those costs have been. Now getting over to the license fees that we're talking about, there is no upfront cost other than the filing fee. So where does the ownership come in?
Really, they're just a license holder. In other words, for business purposes, they're not carrying it on their balance sheet. They're carrying it as an expense to do business, if that helps. It's
Which
not an
is-
asset.
Right, which is, because I have been in a conversation, talking to saying, well, look at the liquor licenses. They own it, they transfer it. But they're not footing the upfront cost that it takes to get one of them, right? And then maybe you get it on the backside when you sell it. But I wonder, and I know we got 3, and I appreciate the fact that we have 3, and we got people here discussing this, but I was actually a little bit surprised that even at $5,000, Aberdeen and Brookings supposedly aren't able to sustain the licenses or the facilities, dispensaries in those towns if they've returned them.
Correct. We did have our records and licensing manager call around to the fellow municipalities, and the city of Aberdeen, like they said in their testimony, it's based on population, so they have, their limitation is 1 per 5,000 people. Their population is estimated at 28, so they have about 5, only 2 have been issued.
And did you do a follow-up with Brookings as well?
We did. Basically, they had 4, but 2 are not renewing, and the remainder, so now we only have 2 in Brookings. And they do not have a calculation as to how they determine the total limit. Their limitations are set by zoning. So that's what ends up impacting how many facilities they can have.
Councilman Danforth?
Can you tell me, are other communities physically selling the license like we would a liquor license? Or is it under the same type of system that we're using where they actually don't own it, they hold it?
Correct.
That's what everybody
To our
is.
knowledge, most of the municipalities we've called are doing it the same way that we are.
Councilman Jurens?
So the million-dollar question is, what do we think's a fair amount? And is 5,000 the right amount? Is it 2,500? Based on the market analysis of those that are in the room that are visiting us about this, what's their thoughts on that? What are anyone's thoughts? Who did the
How about you-
analysis? And
How about you start with telling us your thoughts?
my thoughts is 5,000.
Okay.
And that's, you know, not to get controversial, but it would align Watertown with the rest of the communities. I think the controversy is still out there, but the controversy has been a lot less than, because a lot of the questions, as Mitch spoke about, have really not happened. A lot of the social issues really haven't happened because of the recreational not coming along. But, you know, saying 5,000 is 2,500 a wrong number? You know, that's the question. Because really, I mean, medically, if people need this, why are we banging them so hard? I mean, they're just passing on that cost. A lot of us on here are business owners. I mean, you're splitting up the $25,000 and you're just passing on that charge. Otherwise, you can't keep the doors open. So it's it's a simple concept in the end, but 25,000 looks large. But you know what? I wasn't on this council, and at that time, I probably thought that was fair also. Do we, are we allowed to get their opinion, or do you want them to share it in a follow-up letter, or?
I think that they've all gone on record saying that they want it lowered.
We know that.
Yeah.
What's their expectation as a council?
I think
so that the community can have discussion, because if they don't like it, the community's going to reach out to us.
Yeah, I think that the testimony here today and in the letter said to just put it in alignment with the surrounding communities, which would be $5,000. I think that would be a fair understanding. Sorry, Councilman Shetty had next.
Thank you, Mayor. Just looking at numbers, I guess, I may need to have some folks possibly come back up. Just a point of clarification. I believe Mr. Kane? All right, Kane. There was you'd mentioned 1% of South Dakotans, and maybe I wrote it down wrong. 1% of South Dakotans have access to dispensaries, or did I read correct?
Correct. Approximately 12,000. In fact, you could check right now if you go to.
Why don't you just come on up, and I don't like having comments that might not be on public record.
Thank you. If you honestly want to go check, it's pretty easy to verify the number. But as of the date of my letter, whenever I wrote it, The total number was 12,142 users in the state of South Dakota, and that was approximately 1.35% of our total population has access. And if I can briefly, with respect to the transferability or ownership question that I believe Mr. Danforth presented, they are actually.
Hang on one second. Can I finish on this this
Absolutely.
point right
So-
here? If you
sorry.
don't mind. So on that point, I guess when I heard that, I thought I understood as only 1% have access to this, where actually there's a larger percentage of South Dakotans have access, just only 1 point whatever percentage are actually using it. That'd be right, because they have, I mean, there's many more that have access to get the, you know.
And Councilman Shetty, if I can piggyback off this, when you say access, you're saying those are the people with medical marijuana cards?
Correct.
Okay.
But more people probably can get a medical marijuana card if they, you know, if their doctor sees it as an option, right?
Correct. The entire population, if received a prescribed medical card, would have access. But as of the date of that letter, currently what our state has realized is about 1% has a medical card. And South Dakota has taken a more conservative approach to administering those cards. If you look at basically the attending physician's kind of criteria versus other states, ours is a little more stringent. So.
And thank you for clarifying that, because it's when we decided how many dispensaries to have, one of our thoughts were, how many do we need for a population of Watertown, 20-some thousand, just like some cities are per 5,000, or do you do it per 10,000? So our goal was to have dispensaries, as far as the number of dispensaries, making sure we got the right amount of dispensaries, that people have access, you know, to dispensaries. So there's that point, but then you're talking about just people that are actually utilizing, getting their card for doing it. That's a smaller percentage. So that's one thing, to make sure we have the right number of stores. That's how we came up with 3, was one of the reasons, is how many is enough to be able to serve our community, so everybody has access. But then again, yes, the number of people that are actually doing it, that's this is a newer industry, I guess, because it's newer for South Dakota, maybe not newer, it's been around other states. I would assume as business owners, you guys are hoping this industry, goes up. I don't know if that's a good thing to want or not want, I guess, as far as medicinal purposes, but there's probably going to be, I would assume that there's going to be an uptick in this in the years to come, if indeed this is proving to be an industry that's helping people with their medicinal purposes. So this conversation may change, because we're really in the infancy of this for South Dakota. So that's why too, then we got to keep that in mind. What's it going to look like, if indeed we continue to grow this industry, pardon the pun. But it's one of those things where, this could look different a year or two from now. I know we got to look at it today as well. But I'm just looking at these numbers and just kind of processing what you had mentioned there with that 1%. But then also one other thing is, we have a list. You guys maybe don't see it up there, but we have a list of just some examples within the state. And I noticed that there's about 9 or so that are $5,000 or less for the renewal. And then there's 4 on that list that are $5,000 or more. One is $30,000, 2 are $25,000 each, 1,750. It's not quite as unbalanced as we are making it sound like we're like the Lone Ranger here. We got 4. In fact, then I checked with Vermilion today, and they do $1 per person in their city limits within the census. So the startup is $1 per person. So they're at $11,695. Just it's per person in Vermilion. So, but then I believe they're at $5,000 for the renewal. Now, one thing they did mention to another point was, if you're going to get cultivation license or other added-on license, it's just $5,000. They don't do the same number per one. So that was an interesting concept that Vermilion had. Just on the one other point, again, going over some numbers to help us kind of look at the data. I may have some more in the future here, but that's it for now. So thank you.
And maybe I can address the $5,000 number. Truthfully, that was the recommendation proposed by the state a couple of years ago. The initial application fee, that $1 per person, or as you can see on that, the chart that's in front of the council, is the initial application fee was varied more so than the renewal fee from city to city. But the renewal fee is kind of leaned more towards that $5,000 number. And I agree that, I mean, I believe all of us would like to see this industry grow. I like that pun. But unfortunately, as we sit here today, it's kind of a difficult process. And truthfully, when something such as this was approved by the majority of people, it's hopefully our goal to see it succeed versus imposing a burden. And as the council noted, and I believe our counterparts here, or not counterparts, our assistants, I don't know what word I'm looking for, but basically that there are even some cities where the fee is much less and they can't make it. And I do just want to address that transferability question because that's floating around in my head, but basically that's not really a city thing. The state prohibits the transferability of these licenses. So in order to obtain a license, that's that initial fee. You do it at both the city level and a state level. So really the transferability of a city license is kind of void, is probably the proper term, because you have to receive the license from the state. So if at the Watertown level, if basically Dakota Dispensaries, for instance, were to forego their license, they would lose it at the state level. You have to be licensed at the state level. So,
Councilman Shetty, you still have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a follow-up possibly for Mr. Meyer, because I had a question there too, if you don't mind. It was mentioned, thank you for being here tonight, by the way, and working through this together, because that's what we're trying to do, is work through this together. It's not even council against council or us against anyone else. I'm just trying to get facts and data and what's the best for our city. So, but you had mentioned $500 a day roughly.
Yep.
Is that, you're talking just based off our licensing fee, or is that total?
Total cost of operations.
Okay,
Insurance, heat, lighting, leases.
gotcha.
Just to operate.
Okay, got just clarified. I didn't know if that was just based, because I did the math, and it's more like 100, well, depending on how many days you calculate, 140 to 190 per day with the
Well, it's the
licensing fee.
whole circle of business.
Sure, sure. Okay, just want to clarify that, because I misunderstood that. So, all right, thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you very much. And Mr. Kane, thank you for clarifying that transferability of licenses. That was something that we were curious about. We just wanted it proven. Councilman Peters has been waiting.
Thank you, Mayor. This might have been addressed already, and if it hasn't, I guess I'm looking for a little bit more clarity. But can somebody tell me definitively what the ramifications would be if we reduce the fees from $25,000 to something less? And I thought I heard it once upon a time in this discussion that these fees were placed higher, so there were some barriers to entry, so there weren't, so everybody was submitting an application. Can somebody on staff maybe clear that up for me or help me understand that? And then I would have a follow-up after that.
Okay, Councilman Peters, first, can I ask for a clarification on the question? Are you asking about what the ramifications would be if we lowered the renewal fee to $5,000 or the application fee as well as the renewal fee?
I think both of them for the discussion here.
Okay. City Manager Mack, do you want to take it?
Boy, I'm gonna have to dig real hard into the vault on those conversations. So I do vaguely remember discussions about barriers to entry, but that was specifically before anyone knew what was going to happen with adult use or recreational use marijuana. And even after the council made the decision on the fees and the number of dispensaries, I think we heard from our local representatives that they were also working on recreational use, and they wouldn't allow medical dispensaries to convert to recreational. So the ramifications, I think that applicants are vetted pretty well through the state. It's the Department of Health who issues that. Is that correct? I think they're vetted pretty well. By the time they get to us, there's still work to be done on our side, but a lot of the heavy lifting has been done. There were conversations 2.5 years ago about the social impact of these types of businesses in the community, which I think was part of the decision-making process related to the number of dispensaries and the fees. The ramifications of lowering it, currently it's $75,000 worth of revenue versus 15. And in a $90 million budget, that might not matter to some people. So that's my recollection. I don't know if our community development manager or our public works director or our city attorney have any other recollections of those conversations. They were quite some time ago. But it is something that the council wrestled with quite a bit. And to Councilman Shuddy's point, yes, the fee is high compared to some others, but it's not totally out of the realm either. It's on the higher end, if you will, of that spectrum. That's what I recall. I don't know if that's helpful to you or not. Sorry if it's not.
Councilman Peters, you still have the floor.
No, that was helpful. Thank you, City Manager Mack. Let me ask this a different way too. So if we lower the fees, what impact could that have? And this might be a question for the business owners in the room too, but if we lower the fees, does that open the floodgates of competition up to you guys? And I'm not advocating one way or the other. This is good discussion. I think this is stuff we've got to talk about. And then another thing I'd like a little bit more clarity on too, and maybe this doesn't matter so much, but what impact does it have on our budget if we lower the fees, from our police department and things like that, if at all? I guess I'm just throwing some questions out, and Mayor, I'm not sure how you want to distribute those questions, but I'm an advocate for taking a look. I think that they're high comparatively speaking to other communities that are, at our population level, I guess is the best way to compare it. I just want to make sure that we're not having the same discussion year after year, and the up down of lowering the fees, raising the fees happens. I think that the council before us looked at the $25,000 and said, hey, that's a good starting point because we can always lower them. It's a lot harder to raise them. I don't want to get in a pickle where we lower them and then lower them too much and then have to come back here and raise them again. And I don't know under what circumstances that would happen. I'm just throwing out that idea because it's a lot harder conversation to have about raising fees than it is to lower them.
All right, thank you very much, Councilman Peters. I'll work on getting you some answers. I am reluctant to ask the police for testimony upon the impact, as your question had said, because it is an unprepared, they have not had time to prepare an answer, so I don't want to put them on the record to say something if they wanted to gather more information. Manager Mack, would you agree with me on that? But I'm more than happy to allow you or Chief Toomey to say something if they want to.
I actually did just text Chief Toomey to see if he had anything he'd like to comment on this, and if you do, you're welcome to. If not, you can share it with me later.
And I can also say that if you wanted to work on getting more information, we still have Monday night to provide this answer as well. All right, Chief Toomey, I think, does want to say something.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for allowing me to speak. It's going to be really difficult to gather the stats considering the infancy of the program. I can tell you, I looked briefly at DUIs as it relates to cannabis, and since January to now, we had 8 cannabis-related DUIs, 18 total drug DUIs, but that doesn't say anything to medical marijuana. So it takes, if you look at Colorado studies, it takes a period of time to see the social impact, and you could guess all you want, but we won't really know it until a few years from now.
Chief Toomey, as long as you're there, would you stay there to see if any other councilman has a question specifically to the law enforcement aspect of this? I would ask, of the DUIs that were cannabis related, Did any of those people have a medical marijuana card?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I can get you that answer.
Okay. I was just wondering that because I have had the experience of going along with some of your officers out on site, not drug-related sites, but to a couple different apartment buildings. And it was very clear that marijuana was being smelled, but when talking with your officers, they said there's no point in even knocking on the door sometimes because all it takes is one person to have a card. And this just touches on something that Councilman Jurin says, because you made a really good point about saying if people for medical reasons really do need the relief that this can provide, none of us want to stop that. That's why that passed overwhelmingly in the state of South Dakota. But the reality is, I think we can also all agree that it's not just staying specifically to those who have cards. That's the difficulty of this issue. And I'm not saying that to the people who are being law-abiding good businesses. It's just there is a difficulty related to this because of the cards that makes it a little bit more difficult for law enforcement.
Yeah, and we're still learning how to navigate it. I don't know, do they accept out-of-state cards? I'm not sure what the law is on that right now, but no.
Yeah. No, I think is the answer.
Right.
Councilman Shutt, do you have a question for Chief Toomey?
Potentially, or actually, and this is pertaining to Councilman Peters' question. I just happen to have some data from Colorado on this particular matter here. And it says here that since recreational marijuana was legalized in 2013, traffic deaths where drivers tested positive for marijuana increased 138%, while all Colorado traffic deaths increased 29%. Now that's recreational marijuana, right? So again, we still got to have that conversation. That's going to be for another one if where the state goes with recreational. How does that play into medicinal? I mean, again, that's just, we got to work through that. It also says here that since recreational marijuana was legalized, the percentage of all Colorado traffic deaths involving drivers who tested positive for marijuana increased from 11% in 2013 to 20% in 2020. So there's just some data, brief snapshot of some data of just how there is an uptick with the marijuana use. Again, this is pertaining to recreational, but again, just that question was posed, and that some of this was taken in consideration at our previous council meeting a year and a half, 2 years ago when that was, in working through this, right, wrong, or indifferent. So.
Yes, and that is an important distinction to make, is difference between recreational and medical, because there is a difference. Any other questions for Chief Toomey before we let him go? Councilman Danforth?
Chief, we do liquor compliance checks?
Yes.
Do we do compliance checks with these three?
No, we're not allowed to. The Department of Health regulates it, so we're not allowed to inspect.
So they're doing compliance checks on sales?
Yeah, the research shows that because of staffing and other reasons, they only inspect 2%, I believe, what the stat was of the dispensaries in South Dakota, and that was an old stat. So I'm not sure if anybody from the Department of Health has been here or not. Maybe the owners would be able to testify to that.
I know two of us have been inspected. We have like a health inspection in the same similar line. And it's impossible to.
Could I have you come up and say that on the record again? And just make it brief.
They do inspect us. They come in and check our books, make sure we're complying with people's cards. You can't. I think it would be helpful if maybe it's not legal or not, but the city council and maybe the police officers come to a dispensary and we could show you the safekeepings of how we do it. We are really protecting the industry. It is, you come into the glass door, you have to have your card, you have to be buzzed in. You're only allotted so much product. As the industry, I think we have just done a great job in keeping it just as a medical marijuana business, which is very, very important. I don't think we want to see everyone smoking a joint on every corner in the city of Watertown. And it hasn't happened. I don't think it has caused almost no problems that I see since the center started because we are regulated very tightly.
All right, thank you.
If I can throw one additional tidbit on the legality of it, their point of sale metric system, it's basically, you don't have, when a bar sells a beer to somebody, it's not like there's a government oversight, but in terms of this industry, the state can track each and every sale made by Dakota dispensaries. So that's another tidbit.
Thank you. Councilman Danforth, back to you.
Personally, Mr. Meyer, I think that'd be a funny picture of the whole council going into the dispensary. I think that would be, we'd probably catch some heck on that.
I think it would give you a lot of knowledge.
Well, and that's actually true. It's the naysayers that I worry about. I do have a question, and I'm not really sure how this works. Is this purely of Mr. Toomey, or is this open? Am I okay to?
Councilman Tupper, do you have a question
Yeah,
for
some
Chief
questions
Toomey?
first.
Yeah, but I can wait.
Well,
Because I got 2 or 3 questions, so.
to Chief Toomey?
No.
Okay. As long as the chief is up here, do you want to ask him the question that you had?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, when we're talking about our medical marijuana dispensaries in Watertown, and you look at the number of the card holders in the state, we also got to remember we have a tribe just not too far south of here that also has a dispensary. I think they probably got 8,000 card holders. Question for you, Chief, they cannot purchase it down there and be legal to smoke it off the tribal lands? Am I correct?
Yeah, I believe that's true, correct. If they have a travel card.
Yeah, they can't go down there and buy it and bring it up here and,
Correct.
and carry it legally. So it has to be on tribal lands. So I guess that was my question for Chief Toomey. So
Actually, I had to also allow our attorney, Lisa Carrico, to say something if she had knowledge on this.
They would be treated similarly to an out-of-state card, is how they would do it. So yes, you are correct.
You can also go east and buy it recreational too in Minnesota.
Yeah. Any other questions for Chief Toomey specifically? All right, thank you,
Just
Chief.
one more comment is I trust that these guys are doing the right thing all the time, but you can learn from Colorado, from Indiana, from all those other places that legalize it. There's things like, what do they do with the extra weed that they don't sell? And, that there's a big black market there that needs to be governed. And, and I think our state is doing a good job of learning from Colorado and those other places. But it's just those impacts is what you have to consider as you're considering making this decision. So thanks for your time.
Is something else to Chief Toomey?
no, not for the chief.
Otherwise, I'm going to go back to Councilman Danforth, who had the floor before you. I apologize, Councilman Tupper.
All right, here we go. This is maybe for all, some of you may know this, may not know this, but when we first had this come to us in the numerous discussions that we had as a council, there were way more unknowns than there were knowns. And Mitch, I'm going to say I'm going to correct you, but at the time that this was in front of this council, the state was not recommending $5,000. They were saying reasonable fees. They used the term reasonable because we asked, I know specifically, we asked, what's reasonable with no indication from the state. That was all in flux at that time. So this body's going, well, shoot. And at that time, I'm not even sure that there were any other communities that had actually set their fees yet. There was a lot of discussion like we were going through. And the one that we kept hearing about was Sioux Falls going at 25, and if it was reasonable for them, it's reasonable for us. Now, I do believe renewal fees as we're sitting here today are too high. Okay, so I want you to know that. What the number is, Mr. Jurgens, I don't know that, but 5,000 seems to be in line. But also at the time, it was unknown what was going to happen to these licenses if recreational marijuana was approved. We did not know then. We had indications from our representatives, but indications don't always come true out in Pierre. So the question is what's going to happen to these licenses? Are they just going to convert? Because my guess is we don't need medical marijuana license if we have recreational. Is that correct?
No, they still usually have both. There are
But they sell both at that point?
there are some products that will not become recreational.
Roger. Roger, grab your mic, Roger.
Yeah, and this, again, I appreciate your input, because I just assumed they'd go away.
There are some products that aren't recreational, even in the state of Colorado. So there would probably be a need for both licenses. We're hoping that our licenses turn into a dual license, I think, in the back of our minds. Because we're in the industry, we have the tools to regulate it and control it. We'll still have to do it if it does become recreational.
Mr. West?
In a lot of other states, they do have.
Yeah, would you make sure your green light is on?
There we go. So in a lot of other states, they do have both a recreational and a medical license. The big distinction is usually the taxation. The taxation is typically considerable on recreational or adult use products, whereas it would still benefit a medical card holder to get their card to avoid those additional taxes. So that's been the distinction in a lot of other states that we've seen. As far as about the duality of licenses, there's actually two bills proposed right now for adult use. One is going to decriminalize, the other would actually turn medical licenses into dual licenses. So we really don't know the fate of these licenses at this point in time.
And that's on the plate out in Pier?
Yeah.
Okay. Which brings me to my point, is if we're talking about a stagnant set fee for a given license, and we know that's not going to convert to recreational, to me, that's a whole different story than if it automatically converts to a recreational, because you haven't bought the license. The liquor people spend $200,000 to get theirs. You haven't bought that.
Right.
And to me, that's where the difference is when we look at some of these licensing and what the upfront fees and what some of the renewal fees are. Just looking at my notes here from, I don't know if we know today, well, we don't know today whether they are going to convert or not, correct? I mean, from what I'm hearing, or is there something in place today? I'm assuming no, because recreational is not. So we don't know what that's going to be. So my question is if and when that ever happens and it becomes yours converts, right? How do we bring that in line then with the liquor licenses? Now, and I'm not talking about the $1,500 renewal fee. I'm talking about the upfront cost. I mean, are you ready to have a dramatic increase at that point in your renewal fees?
John and I already have $75,000 invested in your license.
Okay, but
Is your light on?
We have $75,000 invested in the licenses with the city of Watertown at this point that we can't sell. So how long do we just keep paying $25,000? Forever? And then have nothing to sell? That part of it to me is kind of a one-sided, only good for the city. And how it'll never compare to a liquor license. I remember Randy specifying that he didn't want it to be like a liquor license.
Well, we don't.
As an owner, we would. What are we getting for our $25,000 a year? Something we can't sell? To me, that's not really fair.
All right, council, I'm going to just say, we don't want this is not the public hearing, okay? I want the questions to be specifically just for information gathering, okay? We've been at it for an hour. We've got a lot else on the table here. So we've all had probably our entire adult lives to consider this topic. Now, whether or not that completely helps us decide on this specific renewal fee or application fee or whatever else we're going to do, that's something different. But I would ask, just for the sake of time and for the consideration of the other things that we have on our agenda, let's get to the point, ask the questions that will help you make the decision. But the decision is not whether you're going to vote yes or no on it. Your decision is just on giving staff the recommendation on what the fee is going to be. That's all we're deciding right now, okay? Councilman Tupper?
I'll make this as short as I can. When we sat back 2.5 years ago, whenever it was that we sat and we looked at these fees, at that point, I think Councilman Danforth said it, the unknown was the unknown at that time. there was a bill that was being challenged for recreational marijuana. I did hear Attorney General Jack Lee say that the bill that's coming forward in 2024 will include where your licenses will go to you'll be a dual license, basically automatically. And there's my point again is, I think they're probably too high at the point, but do we come back at that point and then say, well, now they're worth a lot more, where are you guys gonna be at that point? But that's down the road, so I probably should just leave that alone, but, I think we were looking at the unknown and trying to protect the owners. Like I say, I was a big proponent of limiting it to 3 people or 3 licenses. So, do I think at this point, yes, it is too high. One question I do have for any of the license holders, and I know that you gotta have the card before you get in there and all that kind of stuff. Matter of fact, me and Mr. Meyer have talked in the past about coming down and looking at it, and I just, it's kind of one of those deals. It's illegal on his spot, and I wouldn't want to put him on because it's against the law as far as the state goes if I don't have a card. So, so you're regulated. I mean, you got to keep track of everything. Does it have a shelf life?
Not to the point where you'd probably throw it into the garbage. Some of the RSOs and those type of things do have shelf lives, and marijuana does have a shelf life. I believe it becomes too old, it becomes real brittle, real dry, just not a very good product to consume. So it does have a shelf life of somewhat.
So what do you do with it when that's past that point, or haven't you got to that point yet? You haven't been in business long
Very,
enough.
very few items have we had to do that, but you have to go into the metric system and waste it and dispose of it properly.
And report that to the state.
Back to the state.
Okay.
To Mr. Tupper, to answer that, the state is looking at a 1-year expiration period. I'm not sure if that got passed into the new administrative rules, but that seems to be pretty standard in other markets as well, about a 1-year shelf life on all products.
So then you're out at those dollars also, so.
Yes.
Yep.
All right, we have at least 4 councilmen who have expressed public interest in lowering the renewal fee. I will actually back that as well. I think that the renewal fee is too high. I am not going to offer a recommendation. However, some people have thrown out $5,000. I would be okay if that is what the council wants to bring forward on on next week's Monday night agenda, is a renewal fee of $5,000. Does anyone want to offer an alternative amount? Councilman Shetty?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your comments on that. It doesn't sound like we're in agreement with 5,000. I think we're open to discussing it, but I don't know if we're ready to just establish that dollar amount.
And that's what I'm saying is, can anyone offer me an alternative amount? Because the only amount that I've heard is 5,000. Councilman Peters?
Yeah, if I could, are we talking about just the renewal or are
We are just on the renewal right now, because I think we can get some consensus on the renewal fee before we start talking about the application fee. So let's just stick with just the renewal fee for right now. Do you have a recommendation on how much the renewal fee should be? So this is for a business that has already paid the $25,000 application fee, which would also get them their first year. All subsequent years would be at what amount? What would you suggest?
if you're asking me, Mayor, I would move forward with the $5,000 proposal.
Now, this does not mean that this is what would be agreed upon next week. We're just looking for something to bring forward so we can have that discussion. City Manager Mack?
Maybe a procedural point of clarity. It is a public meeting. It has been publicly noticed. An agenda has been put forward for it. You can take a vote to give staff direction. So if someone wanted to make a motion that $5,000 show up in the fee resolution next week, you could do that. That doesn't tie you to the 5,000. It's saying this is what we want to move forward for approval. Similarly to what you did with the band funding, if that makes
All right.
sense.
Councilman
Might help
Tupper?
with the discussion.
Just for clarity, we're talking about any licenses that come due in 2024, correct? That renew in 2024. All licenses, I believe 2 of them been paid this year already for, so can you give me somewhat dates so when they were, I think there's 1 due in December.
Two are due in December, one paid in August, and we're waiting on one final payment.
So this would be the ones that paid in, the one that's due in December would still pay the 25.
Correct,
Next year, he would pay
whatever.
5 or whatever we decide. That was just my clarity that I
Yep.
wanted to get to, so.
Yep,
Then the license that we just paid for
For
the
a
year
year,
of
yeah.
2024?
right, but you'd renew again in December of '24, is what he,
But what they would discuss, and if they lowered the price of the renewal fee, we would
Yes.
get that money back.
no.
Okay, that would take a separate motion. Okay? And again, I'm just going to ask to step away from the microphones until you're asked a direct question, and that's just abiding by our own rules. So I think that is something to consider if a councilman wants to make that recommendation. Or City Manager Mack?
I got to think through this. So what you're approving is the renewal rate for 2024. So when they renew in 2024, that will be the number. They are renewing in 2023, and the rate for 2023 has been set at $25,000. Now, if you wanted to take some kind of action next year on, I couldn't even, forgiveness or, God, what was it we talked about? Prorating. Thank you. That would be a separate discussion, but it's no different than, my wellness center membership, renews in December. So I'm paying this year's December rate, but next December when it renews, I pay the 2024 December rate, if that makes sense to you all.
So, council, I just want to make this very clear. So, what we are talking about, unless someone wants to make a motion otherwise, is just the renewal fee going forward. It's not what has already been paid or anything like that. Councilman Shetty?
Thank you, Mayor. One thing that was, and on this topic, one thing that was mentioned a couple years ago by Councilman Danforth was walk before we run. And that's one thing we have been doing is, and we're learning in this process. There's some more information with the legislature, with the voting this next year, with recreational marijuana, as far as the dual licensing. There's some unknowns that'll be coming up in the future potentially, how that's going to look. Another thing is like I mentioned earlier, we have of the larger size cities we got listed here, 9 or 5,000 or less, and 5 or 5,000 or more, as much as 30,000 and 25,000. So just looking at some of those numbers, I wonder if any of those other cities at 5,000 are having discussions like this to wonder, well, what is reasonable? Maybe we need to up our, that's a fair question to ask, that some cities may be looking at the other direction. So that's why I'm just not sure 5,000 is necessarily to go all the way from 25 to 5 in this process here. So that's why I'm questioning that dollar amount per se. Plus, I gotta believe we must have, I'm not saying this to pander. We've got you guys are keeping it going, your business the last couple of years, or maybe just got started at these amounts. You moved all the way from Nevada to Watertown for this. So I would be fair to say we're doing something right with the business. Pay cut, right? But banking on the future of this industry, and so that's there is a lot more to be had in this conversation. So again, I'm just trying to look visionary down the road and just not to jump too far down on this renewal fee.
Councilman Peters?
Good discussion. I think maybe, instead of words repeating, we're all on the same page. I think to some extent, it sounds like anything we say tonight won't necessarily, to some extent matter until we vote on it at the next meeting. So to City Manager Mack's point, I guess I would make a motion that we just move forward at the $5,000 consideration, understanding that that doesn't mean we're voting for that tonight. That just means the staff has the autonomy to start moving forward with those numbers so we can have more discussion at the next meeting. Does that make sense, Mayor?
I would agree with that. Councilman Peters, Councilman Jurgens, did you want to second that?
I'll second it.
All right. We have a motion to, at least for next week, bring forward a proposal for the renewal fee of being $5,000. That is by Councilman Peters, seconded by Councilman Jurgens. Any other discussion on that? Councilman Tupper?
That is just on the renewal fee and not the application fee, correct?
And it's also only going forward,
Yes.
okay? Councilman Danforth?
I really want, and I'm going to say this because it's a matter of record, any support that I give in lowering this amount, which I do believe, as I've stated, there should be some reduction, don't know exactly what that is based on what we know today, and that this is purely as it relates to medical marijuana licensing. If this converts and becomes a dual purpose or a dual license or whatever it is, I want you guys to know, because you're going to be the ones that come back, that says that's going to get looked at again if and when that happens. This is predicated solely on what we know today, and that is the dispensary medical marijuana licensing as we know it today. So,
Councilman Shetty?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so, on this vote, like I said, I'm for reviewing this. I'm not for the 5,000. I am going to vote no for that reason, just for the record. I'm not saying yes, even though it's not technically voting for 5,000, it's just to get it on the agenda. So I'm going to vote no on that. However, I am for changing it, just not the 5,000, so.
All right. I do have some final comments before we leave just the cannabis, but I want to give anyone else a chance to speak first. So I want to explain a few things. There have been other issues raised here tonight, such as the application fee being $25,000 and the desire to possibly change that. That we're not discussing that. We are purely talking the renewal fees at this meeting. Therefore, as much as we could bring that up, and that could be a viable conversation to have, it is not germane to the conversation today or what was printed for the fee renewal structure. Therefore, that's out of line. We won't deal with it. If Councilman wants to bring it up in the future, we can do that. Likewise, if you want to make a motion to change the renewal for 2023 going forward, so there's two companies that have already paid their $25,000, one that hasn't. If you want to make that motion, that is also not talking about fee renewal, so therefore also not appropriate in this conversation. But if you want to make that motion at some future council meeting, that is within your power to do so. Do we all understand here? Okay, and also for the people in the audience, we have to stick with what was listed publicly, and that is a fee renewal structure. So retroactive fee was not printed on the agenda, so we can't discuss it. One other thing that I would actually like to pursue and investigate, but I need more information, is Mr. West mentioned something about having production and cultivation. That sparked an interesting thing in my mind because that was a concern that we had because we did not know, again, as Councilman Danforth, all of us who were there for the conversation, there was a lot we did not know about how this was going to play out. However, if we are going to have these licenses, which we are, then I think I would be interested to find out if maybe we should allow a lower application fee, lower renewal fee for production and cultivation, because I'd rather have our companies in Watertown doing that than paying some out-of-state company to bring it in. And then that way we get more of the sales tax. That's just a thought, but I need to find out more about that because let's say if Mr. West has and I don't want to call you out, but you're the one who mentioned it. Let's say if you have a cultivation entity, would you then sell it to your dispensary? Because in my mind, it'd be probably good for your business, but it would be good for the city of Watertown because we'd get the sales tax potentially. I'm just throwing it out there as an idea that I just at least wanted to approach, but again, not germane. I just wanted to say that there are other issues that we're at here. So we have a motion for next week. Is it really going to change the vote? Okay. Yeah, because we need to vote on this motion. And I'm not saying, we've been at it for an hour 20 on just this.
The only thing I want to clarify is when it does state in the fee resolution, the medical cannabis license, the 25 and whatever the renewal is going to be is for each one of those types, dispensary, cultivation. Just so if you had a different one, this would be the rate for whatever that license is.
Actually, then, I'll tell you what, I'll make a motion that renewal of cultivation and production could be set at 5,000 as well. Keep the application fee the same, because again, we're not dealing with that. But the renewal, but we don't have a business that currently has either one. But as long as we're discussing it, I would at least mention that. I have a motion from myself, seconded by Councilman Tupper. But I'm sorry, we got off, we haven't voted, that would be okay, sorry about that. I was just mentioning it, broke my own rules. Let's vote, because I said, is it germane to the vote? Okay,
Well,
let's just stick to the vote.
And you
Okay.
do not have to separate it because you're keeping that number the same.
Okay,
Yep. Did one motion, you're good.
but that was not the motion that Councilman Peters made. Councilman Peters, would you be okay with changing it, lowering the renewal fee related to medical marijuana or cannabis to $5,000? That would mean,
Absolutely, Mayor.
Councilman Jurgens, are you okay keeping your second on that?
Good to go.
Okay, that is the motion then, is to lower all renewal rates on medical cannabis to $5,000. Any further discussion on that? Hearing none, let's just,
You got quick on the shotgun.
we've been, like I said, we've been at it for an hour 20.
I know that, Mayor, but-
nothing's
but-
going to change on this
I
vote.
understand that. I will tell you, with what you just did,
Okay.
changes my vote on this.
Okay, then let's break it up.
Because our focus was on the one issue, and that is the dispensaries. I think there's a lot of information consideration needs to take place on those other items if and when that ever happens. I would just soon leave it as it is until it shows up on our plate and then deal with it, because we don't know what laws or whatever else is gonna be affected by that. And I think this is the one we know, let's deal with this one and let's
Okay.
move on. That's
Okay.
my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. I think you caught me correctly. Councilman Jurgens?
We can always raise it.
Good luck.
With that said, I actually do think it's appropriate to go back to the original motion of just the $5,000 on the renewal for the dispensaries. All those in favor? City Manager Mack?
But the renewal is for medical cannabis licenses. That's
Yeah.
how it's listed in the schedule, so it's not just for dispensaries.
But the motion was just on dispensaries. I'm just saying that was the motion. Because, okay, so,
So if this is the motion of the council, what I will do is I will bring forward on the fee resolution, I will break it out. And then you'll see the different licenses. All the other ones, dispensaries then, would be 25, because we haven't had the conversation.
And you
Am I
can make the
understanding that
final
right?
decision on Monday.
Councilman Peters?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could you just repeat the motion at hand here? I'm getting confused here a little bit.
The motion is to lower the renewal fee for dispensaries, for medical cannabis dispensaries to $5,000.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All those in favor, just say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. That will be on the agenda for next Monday night. I am not passionate about lowering the renewal fee for either the production or cultivation. I think it's something that we should look at. I'll probably support, but there are a lot of questions that I have regarding it. I'm not necessarily sure I'm ready to make that motion now or get that information within the next week. However, I would like to work with those in the business to possibly give me some more information, but then also our law enforcement, of course, as well. So we're just going to stick with that motion for right now. So, okay, we're going to go on for the rest of the renewal fee structure because Councilman Peters had some comments.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just looking here before we moved on, past at the beginning of the meeting. The Prairie Lakes Wellness Center fees, and I've got to pull them up here. I don't have them in front of me again, but it looks like they've taken a substantial jump. And I didn't know if maybe Dusty or Teresa were there just to answer some questions, because if I recall right, and I'm going completely off memory here, so I could be off, but I'm pretty sure the family annual membership last year was like $600 and some, and now it's $800 and some this year. And then secondly, I'm a little bit confused because it seems as though the monthly rate for all memberships is cheaper. And if I recall, if you paid your annual membership in full in a lump sum, it was cheaper than doing the monthly route. So I guess I'm just looking for a little bit of clarity there, because I know we've got a lot of people in the community that go to the wellness center. I don't want them to be shocked when it's time to renew their membership and it's substantially different, but I could be wrong. So a little clarification would be great.
City Manager Mack.
I'll defer to our Park and Rec Director, Dusty.
I don't quite understand your first comment. As far as the monthly, historically, the monthly has been less expensive than the annual, which is atypical for an operation of that type. So what are looking at doing is increasing the monthly to a point where that is actually more expensive than your annual. So those fees have been adjusted, incrementally towards that end.
Can you speak to the annual membership? If they've increased, how much they've increased by?
That, I don't have that in front of me right now. Teresa would be more familiar with that. I looked at it at one point, but I honestly can't remember.
Director Roddick, I want to be clear. I'm not sure I understood. So, yeah, just doing the math, it's cheaper to have a monthly membership right now than an annual, but you were looking at raising the monthly?
Correct.
And is that already reflected here in the Wellness Center?
I believe so.
Okay, so let's say the adult single membership at $47 is up from, what was it last year?
46 is where it's at. I'm on the website right now. So the current fees for a basic fitness membership for an adult monthly is $46, annual is $641. For a family, it's currently $839.60. So I'm not sure that has changed at all for a family membership.
It's, okay, has it?
For a family membership, it has not, we're not recommending a change from the current rate for 2024. The monthly, let's look at family, is currently $63, and we're recommending that you bump that up to $64.
Minimal.
It is. It's still cheaper than a monthly.
Or annual.
Than an annual,
Yeah.
sorry. Monthly is cheaper than an annual. But in order to get that monthly to not be cheaper than an annual, it's a pretty significant increase. So we wanted to
Do it incrementally.
walk, not run into it, to quote some of you.
Councilman Peters, you still have the floor, so take it away.
Yeah, and maybe this is a question for Teresa, but wouldn't it make more sense to have the lump sum fee more smaller than the monthly? That to me makes more
Yes.
sense financially. So.
Ultimately, that's where we're going.
Yeah, that is the goal. I'm not sure how these fees got set when the Wellness Center was opened. And I know the park board did a lot of work on them, and sometimes that stuff happened without coming to council, but they're flip-flop. It should be more expensive to just have a monthly, pay by month than to have an annual membership. But in order to get there, we're either going to have to do a slow walk into it, which is what we're recommending, or you just rip the Band-Aid off and say, here's the new monthly rate. and that might turn some people off. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think I get it now. Appreciate it.
Councilman Danforth.
Yeah, this is really more of a procedural issue. I think what would be really, really helpful when we're given this for consideration is we see current rates and such plus proposed, so we can visually look at it and say, okay, whatever it is. This is hard because I don't know what to qualify this against, right? So, just a thought for how we proceed next year.
Thank you. Any further questions on any of the other fees? And just to clarify one thing, when I said earlier that it didn't look like the fees had changed much on the three that I pay yearly, which is the Wellness Center and the golf course. Well, I pay annually on the Wellness Center, so that's why I didn't notice any change. I would just recommend on the monthly fee, maybe not such a slow walk to get the fees back up to some level, maybe a little bit of a faster pace. $5 a year, maybe. I'm not making that motion official tonight, a month, yeah. But a $1 increase, anyway, I don't want to wreak havoc with the Wellness Center, but that would be at least a desire of mine to bring it at least onto par, because I can understand the flexibility that some people want with having a monthly membership. Those people in our community that we cherish very much that might spend the winter down south and don't want to pay for an annual membership. Totally agree with that, but to have them pay less than someone who pays by the year is also probably not something that I don't think, I would doubt that a lot of people think is fair. Yeah, Councilman Danforth?
Thank you, Mayor. Dusty, what's on this, what's the time frame that you guys envisioned, and Amanda, in regards to getting it in the right position of the monthly being more so than?
When Teresa and I kind of discovered this last year, because I believe our increase last year was a little more than, what is being requested this year. A couple of years was all, maybe 3 years. So we may, do a more substantial increase next year.
Because as the mayor indicated, if you do the math and we kind of creep at this pace, it's going to be many, many years before we get there.
Yeah.
I think we should maybe have a goal and say, look, we're going to have this thing fully converted in 3 years, and we're going to do 3 incremental steps to get there. Here you go. It seems appropriate. I agree, Mayor, that it's, we need to reward those that are committing to the year, and that's really where you're going to it.
And Director Roddick and City Manager Mack, I actually commend you for bringing this to us. This has obviously been something that predates your arrival and your arrival, our arrival. So you're just trying to bring it to be a level playing field. So I applaud you. So it's me mentioning that is not besmirching your efforts at all. I was just saying.
I've got thick skin. Plus, I'm paying the annual membership too. So,
you know what,
Mayor,
Mayor, I do have a comment. We could help Dusty and you out by lowering the annual and making that like a 4% or a 5% discount going forward if we have the rate increase. I mean, who knows here? Maybe we'll pick up about 1,000 new members by doing this correctly and marketing it correctly.
Actually, Councilman Jurgens, I see City Manager Mack's reaction to that, but that's a legitimate request. I'm just saying, you can make that motion. It's definitely something that can be considered, but it doesn't mean that we all vote for it. But what I will say is that is not, well, and I guess that could be a fee renewal discussion if you wanted to make it such, but.
My only comment on it is that would have a significant impact on revenues. And the Wellness Center is a special revenue fund that we try to it's a little bit like an enterprise fund where you cover operations with your rates. And you certainly can do that. And we would figure out the model to make that work. But that could impact the general fund if you have to increase transfer from the general. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul if you do that.
I'm not going to recommend or make a motion, but this, everybody laughed about it, but I think you caught, Mayor, what I'm thinking. From a business acumen standpoint, we don't know how many additional memberships you could get from the marketing of this. Let's run it like a business. I mean, it is. It's a business. Do we pick up, I threw out 1,000, but do we pick up 25? Do we pick up 100? That's why I brought it up. I'm not going to make a motion.
All right. Any other discussion on the fee renewal or memberships, administration, permits, licenses? Let's move on then. Item B is a discussion on proposed long-term capital improvement plan. We will go to City Manager Mack first.
Thank you, Mayor. We've already done the presentation on the long-term capital plan for years 25 through 29. But through the course of the last several weeks at the council retreat, individual discussions we've had, there are 2 items within that long-term plan in years 25 and 26 that are related to the street facility. And the feel that we've been getting from the elected body is that perhaps you'd rather take those out, and when a decision has been made on the street facility, just wrap it all into one funding mechanism. And so we thought we'd bring it forward to you before we put it on the agenda for approval next week to have that discussion and give us some direction if you want that still in there or if you'd like us to take those items out.
Thank you, City Manager. Should I go anywhere else? Finance Officer Bob Zine, did you have anything to add?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, thank you. I'll just open it up for questions and comments by the council. Councilman Danforth?
I believe that those subsequent years need to come out of the long term. I'm not a believer that you put something in that is a second and or third phase of something that we haven't even approved a first phase with. So my position is if we knew what we were doing exactly with the street department, then they could stay in there and we can permit. And I do get it that it's just a placeholder, but we all know about those subsequent phases or requirements there. So my position is it should not be on there.
Councilman Danforth, is that an official motion?
It's actually a complaint, sir.
That's not a complaint.
I don't know what to call it. I guess it is.
That's
if
a
that's what it
contradiction.
takes. I would make the motion to remove them until we figure out where we're at with that. Yep.
Motion made by Councilman Danforth, seconded by Councilman Tupper. I'm going to do a better job on this one than I did on the last one, and we're going to stay specifically on that motion, nothing else. So the motion is to strike the second and third phase of the street department project, which, as you will see, is listed there. We've already had that discussion. Any further discussion on that specific motion? Councilman Shetty?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with this as we're working out the details. We're just a lot of unknowns yet, so just common sense, I believe, to move forward this way.
I'll just say I am in favor of that as well. There's a lot of unknowns. I know that the council is concerned about the overall economy, and we want to be prudent with the city finances going forward before making a huge decision like the street department, which we are all in favor of. We're just not exactly sure if the timing is correct. Any further discussion? All right, the motion is just to strike those 2 items, which is basically, how would you say it? Phase 2 and phase 3 of the street department? That's the motion. All those in favor, just say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion carries. That'll be on next week's proposal. Is there anything else, Council? Finance Officer Bob Zine?
The only thing that I did want to say is from the discussions that the council had on the long-term capital about leasing, future equipment, some of the bigger, the loaders, the sweepers, everything in the street. If you do look at the very end of the budget or the long-term plan book now, you will see what those lease options would do. So we did add in some more information, and that's just more for information purposes. You wouldn't really be approving that. That would be if you decided to lease versus purchase. Thank you.
Councilman Danforth has a question. Is that reflected in the numbers? Is that?
So
The
what
book
we,
that we have would not indicate that, correct?
so the new one that's attached to this last agenda does have that information in it.
Good.
Yep.
Thank you.
And the 2024 budget that you approved, I think there were a couple of items in the 24 budget that we budgeted for leasing versus purchasing.
Correct.
I also want to just say something about the long-term capital improvement plan that gets overlooked. And this is just an example of when things are being done well and running smoothly, we don't get comment on it. And I want to thank our police department, our fire department, our street department, all of the city departments that actually do project out years ahead of time. Parks and Rec, I didn't mean to ignore you, Dusty, but when you have to plan out this long in the future for the vehicles, for the equipment, for the infrastructure, that's well done, and that allows us to budget on a level that actually allows us to do our daily operations. I know it's the big projects that get the hype and make the headlines, but this is an example where government is working well, people are planning well. Councilman Shetty?
Justin projected 5 years of road improvements too, so we can't forget him.
I will just say everyone.
Everyone.
All right. Any other changes to be made to the CIP? Councilman Tupper?
I don't know if it's changes or information that I'd like to bring up. It's not really a change at this point, so. Maybe I'll just, before we vote then, I'll just bring up, I'd like to bring up the fact that I believe, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, fire department, East Fire Department, it's in 26 or 27? 27. My concern with that is I've watched this project get, maybe I shouldn't say get kicked down the road, but get pushed back a little bit over a number of years. And I believe that, and actually, I don't know if Chief Rowland would have those numbers with him. I requested some numbers. Someplace we got to put a stake in the ground where that project's going to go. And if we're going to take a couple of these other projects out for the time being, I would like to at least start looking for someplace to put a stake in the ground. They're not making any more land, put it that way. And as things developed in the east side of town, that's given us less and less options to put that east station. So I would really like to keep that in the open. Am I out of line for asking Chief Rowland if he's got those projections or numbers with him, or?
I mean, I guess it doesn't change the vote.
No.
So, because the East Side Fire Station is still in the CIP.
It is, and it's been moved up a year. So, every year as we do this, we try to find ways to get it closer. I would like to just clarify that by taking those two buildings out, only because our friends from the radio station are here, doesn't mean that you all have said you're not doing the street
No,
facility
that's right.
right now.
Yep.
Or a city hall project. But, I mean, if you've got that information, you can certainly share
have
it.
that information, Chief?
The call time information, is that what you're talking about? Is that right, Councilman Tupper?
Chief Rowland.
Yep. And there again, part of my plan is, instead of waiting until 2027 to put a stake in the ground and find a location for that, I think we need to start looking at that now, so.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Councilman Tupper. If we were to propose at East Fire Station in 2022 for numbers, what I gave Councilman Tupper about a month ago in regards to what we did in 2016 versus 2022, we averaged about 500-600 increase in calls, just in ambulance calls, and that in general for our department. And if we had an east station, the jurisdictional lines that we've drawn up for many years, in 2016, we'd responded to 630 some calls, or like 25% of the call volume on that side of the city. In 2022, we'd respond to 880 calls, or 29%, or basically a third of our calls would be generated from that area of town, the east side of the city. And that would be in the First Avenue, 19th Street area. Response times that were generated by numerous clock times would be 3 to 4 minutes to the very northeast part of the city, and 4-minute range to the very southeast part of the city. And that would be all the way into the Pheasant Ridge industrial area. Anything else that you were looking for, Councilman Tupper?
Those call times, that would be a projected what it would be if we had a East Fire Station?
Correct. As of right now, we're about a 10-minute response time to the southeast, and that 8 to 10-minute time to the northeast part of the city. So yes, if we had a station that was located EMS or fire, whatever the council projects someday, would be in that 3 to 4 minute to the northeast and 4 minutes to the southeast.
So can you, I know this is drilling you for a lot of information a month ago, but the American Medical Association or whatever it is on a heart attack patient, what are the stats on that?
So the American Heart Association says we want to get there within the first 5 minutes with a defibrillator. If we don't get there in that first 5-minute window for somebody in cardiac arrest, heart not beating, pulseless, it decreases by 10% thereafter every minute. Or let's say 7 minutes, a 30% chance of survivability, 9 minutes, 10%, 10 minutes dead. That's kind of the numbers that we use for the AHA. When it comes to the fire side, we use the initial full alarm assignment, 8 minutes with 15 people on the ground. And unfortunately, we never hit that. That's a 0% by the NFPA markers. So that's kind of where we're at on that number.
Thank you, Chief.
Yep.
All right. And we can talk about this more, but really, if anything, if you're in favor of an East Side Fire Station, it's actually being moved up. So we all understand that there's worth in it. So it's not really a question of worth, but timing and on the CIP. Councilman Danforth, did you have something?
Yeah, Mayor, just a question of Mr. Rowland here, but of that 880 in 2022 for that area, how many were ambulance versus what were actual fire calls?
The 880 was actual ambulance calls.
That's ambulance calls
Correct,
only?
yep. Yep.
Okay.
And we did 3,024 in 2022.
Okay. And may I ask Mr. Tupper, Randy, when you're saying putting a stake in the ground, are you talking about putting a stake in the ground and saying, here's where we're going to build it? Or are you saying, here's where we're going to build it and we're going to build it? Which are you referring to?
Councilman Tupper, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, at least get a stake in the ground.
Where we're going to build it?
Yeah, where we're going to build it. Like I say, they're not making more land. And as we're waiting, there's less and less land available. So I'd at least like to see us, if you look at the way City Sioux Falls develops, when they start doing the development, the fire department has a stake in the ground as they grow out, way before they ever build a facility. So I'd like to see us at least start looking and possibly be able to put a stake in the ground.
Mayor, may I continue just for a second here?
Yep, Councilman.
If we were to find something prior to the 2026 number that says that's the piece of land we want and it's X dollars, how would that be handled in regards to our ability to secure that?
We would bring a proposal forward to council, and you do a budget supplement.
And do reserves or something? Okay, my last
Use
comment on this is I hope that this item, and there's some other items, will be a part of our discussions at our strategic planning, because to me, this is very strategic in regards to the support of our community. This is service improvement, which is, to me, is different than ice arenas and wellness centers. This is something that people can buy in on, and they benefit very directly from it in the most significant way, life and death or property. So I do believe this is intended to be part of our discussion, and it needs to be. I think we'll come out of that with a good understanding of what we want to do.
And City Manager Mack, she actually brought that up from 28 to 27. That was her decision to do that, so.
Any further discussion on the CIP? Councilman Shetty?
On this point, I appreciate the data, the information here. That just helps refresh me, and I'm sure everyone else here to keep this on the radar. And I do appreciate moving it up as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, we'll move on to item C, Council 2024 calendar. City Manager Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. What you have in front of you are two options for council meetings next year. Coming out of the retreat and our discussions about work sessions and communications and making that all flow a little better is how we've crafted options A and B. Option A keeps our regular schedule of Mondays, and we've added a work session. So we'd have a meeting every Monday for the first 4 Mondays of the month. So you'd have a council meeting, work session, council meeting, work session. Option B switches your meetings to Tuesdays. Still four times a month in order to help with that information flow and the look aheads to when you're going to be taking action. It's really, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other on Mondays versus Tuesdays. Mondays, we do sometimes run into challenges with holidays, so you're automatically moving it to a Tuesday. There's some theories about having Monday as a work day to prepare for the council meeting on a Tuesday. It's entirely up to all of you what you'd like to do. But in order for us to continue moving forward with some of that stuff, like I said, that came out of the retreat, and I don't know, Heath, if you can pull, I don't know how to share my screen to the deal. You do. I'll let you keep doing that. Not only the council manager meeting and information flow graphic that we gave you all at the retreat, but building out that grid where we're building out the next 12 months of meetings and items. Either one of these works well for staff. We just need to know what works best for you so that we can start programming our work to meet your needs. So with that, I will leave it up to all of you to just tell us what you want.
Councilman Peters?
Thanks, Mayor. Well, I'll try to stay off my soapbox here because I know the city manager and a few other council members have heard me talk about this, but I am a strong proponent of keeping the meetings on Mondays for lots of reasons. One of them being, I think that the community, understands that meetings are held on Mondays, and certainly when there's a 3-day holiday or a holiday on a Monday, people understand that meetings are Tuesdays, but also for people like myself who work and who travel quite a bit. Obviously, I'm in Atlanta right now, zooming in. I count on Mondays for having meetings, and the rest of the week set aside for work and constituent services. So I would recommend strongly that we keep the meetings on Mondays. Certainly I could see some benefit for having an extra day at the beginning of the week to get things in order for the council meetings, because I know that things can get crazy on Mondays, but we also have the whole rest of the week to prepare for that following Monday as well. And that goes, for all of us, myself included. So I just want to go on the record to say that I'm a big supporter of Monday meetings. Thank you.
Councilman Shetty?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. And good valid points there. I guess for me, as I been thinking about this, there's looking at my personal life and how it looks that way, but ultimately I believe what is best to run the city, right? And so as I looked at it from that perspective, I thought about the Monday having that extra day, because the agenda comes out, well, for sure by Friday, but sometimes by Thursday, correct? So depending when the agenda comes out, I'm not sure if this will affect the agenda. Will that just automatically be Friday, you think? Or on that quick question, I guess.
Okay, repeat your question. I thought I heard it, and now I'm thinking I heard it
Would the
incorrect.
agenda be like still trying to shoot for a Thursday or whatever day, or would it kind of move to Friday with the Monday move?
No, our goal with improving our systems is to get the agendas out on Thursday, regardless if the meetings are on Mondays or Tuesdays.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. And so that gives us then, gives us an extra day on Monday to work through the agenda per se. So there's that. I'm looking at that from that perspective, I guess. However, if we had more, work sessions or whatever you want to call them on the opposite days of the week. Would that make us more prepared as well, though, for the agenda coming up? If we had, let's say if it's Mondays, keep it as Mondays, and every other Monday we have work sessions. Well, then that kind of gives us a heads up what's going to be on the agenda. So I'm just looking at that as well.
Yeah, it should. And, every council's different in how they prepare for a council meeting. I've worked with councils where, the minute they get their packet, they're diving into it and asking questions all weekend, all day up leading up to the meeting. I've had council members who walk in opening their packet, into me. So it just depends on what level of engagement different people have. But that is the goal with, adding an additional work session, is to help better prepare the council for decision making. So our goal is that when you get to an actual council meeting where you're asked to make decisions, it's not the first time you're seeing that information. It really and truthfully, it does not matter one way or the other if the meetings are on Mondays or Tuesdays. Someone had brought it up and, well, that's a good idea. It's something we should talk about. If you want to stick with Mondays, that works great. If you want to move it to Tuesdays, we can do that. Moving it to Tuesdays will require you to change the ordinance because the ordinance calls out Mondays as your meeting dates, but that's an administrative change that's pretty simple to do.
You still have the floor.
Yep, thank you, Mayor. So if we're going to have an uptick on the other Mondays or Tuesdays from the council meetings, then there is the personal side as far as councilmen and women that'll be doing this in the years to come. Having it on Monday helps you to, especially if you travel, it does help for planning your week out. So there is, we do need to take that into some consideration in this process as well, especially if we're going to be adding more days. Then if it's every Tuesday, I could see that could be a challenge on a personal side for some folks. However, I'm not opposed to that. I'm just thinking my thoughts out loud here.
So we're recommending adding one additional day a month because we're already meeting 3 times, or we're scheduled to meet 3 times a month. Sometimes we cancel a work session if there's not, anything that you all need to be discussing. So we'd be adding that 4th Monday or Tuesday, whatever you land on. The weeks that have 5, we wouldn't need to meet then.
Any further discussion? Is there any councilman who would like to make a motion to change the meetings to Tuesdays? Councilman Peters, did you have anything to add?
No, I don't think so right now, Mayor, but I'll be on standby.
Okay. Any recommendation? I guess Tuesday sounds interesting to me, but I don't feel strongly enough about it to really push for it.
I do have a comment.
Councilman Jurgens?
This town is big on their high school sports, and Tuesdays is pretty much every season has a Tuesday night. It's just so much easier if we're involved or if we have kids, but also for the tons of people that are semi-retired or retired that just love to go there. This gives an opportunity on Monday nights to be here for, discussion and.
So entertainment 2 nights a week. All right. All right. Thank you for bringing that forward, but I don't think that there's the will to change it as is, but we definitely, does anyone else have a comment about the other items on there? The adding of more work sessions. And those are, City Manager Mack, just to clarify, that's just what's going to be on the schedule. It doesn't automatically mean that every work session is going to be called. Or does it?
Well, we would schedule them. And the goal of the part of the goal of the work sessions is to prepare you for the upcoming council meeting. You'll see here under future council items, so we have a list of everything for the most part, barring any strange things coming up, that's going to be on the agenda for Monday. And that gives you an opportunity, one, to see it and ask questions now, or start asking questions throughout the week. Hey, I saw, for example, the Humane Society, we have some amendments to their contract. They're going to be on the agenda Monday. Hey, I want to talk through that. What's that look like? So yeah, in theory, we would want to meet all of those times, but if something were to change with that, we certainly could cancel, and we've done that in the past. And as you dive more into strategic planning, and I mean, really, those work sessions also are meant to allow you all an opportunity to have less formal conversations and discussions with each other about those big picture items that you all deem important. The other change, I don't know if you picked up on this, is that we'd like to hold all of the work sessions at the PD community room. Changing the environment, as we learned with the retreat, also lends to just some more, I'm not quite sure the words to use, because it's still a public meeting, it's a formal meeting, but it gives you the freedom to speak a little more freely with each other about those different items, and changing the venue helps with that. So, and it's the best space to use if we're going to record and post those meetings. Upstairs gets a little wonky.
Any further discussion on this? I do have something. So my concern, and this would just be as I would run the meeting, I would either need to work with council to have you on board with me going forward, because if we are going to have more work sessions, I want to avoid what has occurred, which is we've had work sessions where the discussions have gone on for several hours, and then we still have a city council meeting where we discuss it again for another hour or two. If this is going to be the schedule going forward, I am going to be treating the work sessions more formally, actually, rather not more informally, simply because people are going to learn that this is where a lot of this is vetted out. Because we had a situation tonight where everyone who was interested in medical cannabis came knowing that this is when we were going to discuss it. We are also going to discuss it on Monday, but if we're going to have repetitive meetings on the same topic, that's just, and I know that we can work together to avoid that, but you understand my concern on this, because I don't fear another hour and a half discussion on medical cannabis on Monday, but there have been other issues where we have discussed something in work session that has gone on for over an hour, and then we still had a city council meeting that also went on for an hour. Because I guess my question is, and I believe I know where you're going, City Manager Mack, because we've talked about it. The idea is to get information to learn about something at a work session, to vote on it at a council meeting. But that's where I would need the council to understand that this is what we're going to do. And I would also need the public to understand that I am not taking public testimony at that point.
Do you want me to? So I would agree with you. The way that I've seen work sessions or study sessions handled, communities I've been in, other communities, unless there's a subject matter expert that you want to call on, the time for public comment on particular items is at the council meeting. The work sessions are meant for you all to converse with each other, to have that dialogue, to be able to say, I disagree with you, and here's why, and talk through that. You'll also notice it's kind of small up on the screen, but we've started plugging in time limits, right? So if only just to keep ourselves within the parameters of the discussion that we want to have. And if something is going to take longer, well, then you all have the opportunity to call that out. Like, I think we need to spend more time on this. So we're going to take more time now, or at the next work session, we're going to discuss it again. Because the point of the council meetings is to make decisions. And sometimes I think, while we always get to a decision at a council meeting, I sometimes think that there's frustration because you you haven't had the ability or opportunity or whatever you want to call it to have that informal, formal dialogue with each other around whatever particular issue it might be. I'm trying to think of some other matters that would come up throughout a work session. Recodification, and we have lots of work still to do with that. That will take some time. Lisa's very excited about it. So, and I do want to, we're recommending adding one meeting a month because it ties to the council cycle. If we don't, and, then we're missing 2 full weeks between council meetings to prepare you for what's coming on a council agenda. So that's really what the intent behind it is to tie everything that you're doing at a work session to an upcoming meeting.
Councilman Peters?
Good discussion. Appreciate that, City Manager Mack. I would echo the mayor's comments. And one thing that, might seem like a small thing, but could end up being a big thing in the future is it's very hard to find people, especially younger folks like myself with the family, to get involved into government. And the reason is because it can be very time consuming. So if we're adding another meeting, I'm all about it. I think all the points here were valid. I guess I would just throw a point of caution out that, we might be hurting ourselves long-term when we're to find good candidates in Watertown. And I think it's extremely important to have people with all walks of life represent in government. And I think with busy lives, everyone lives a busy life, but myself, speaking personally as a 30-year-old with 2 kids and 1 on the way, this does add, more. Obviously, we were elected to do the job, so I will do it. But if there's a way to be more efficient, to the mayor's point, in our current work sessions, maybe we look at that first and figure out how to go from there. So I just want to go on the record to share that with my colleagues here.
City Manager Mack?
Your point is well taken, Councilman. All of us as staff also don't like the idea of more meetings. But what we do like the idea of is better meetings. And not to say that our meetings have been bad, but more productive. And really, for staff, this is what gives us direction on what it is you want us to be doing. And that's the point. And I think it might take a little while to get into the right routine of this. But they work very, very well in communities of our size, where you're dealing with a lot of different issues a lot of the time. And hopefully the process as we go through this will make our council meetings shorter, because you have had the discussions with one another. And now the council meetings are time to have the discussion with the public, so that might look a little different, but you've had the opportunity to have a public discussion with one another about whatever it is in front of you. I want no more meetings than anyone else. But I think it's the right thing to do to really enhance our workflow, enhance the decision-making process, and give you all the opportunity to vet ideas as colleagues.
I'm going to hold you to that, City Manager Mack, if this is going to make our council meeting shorter.
I'm not even going to say anything.
I'm teasing.
Councilman Jurens?
Thank you, Councilman Peters, for opening up that can, because I was ready to do it. What I believe, and I don't know what is slowing down, is I believe we're lacking in the last few years since Beth Manti left, ladies being involved in the council and running for council positions. On a state level, we're seeing a big rise in that, and on a city level, we're not. Now, again, he spoke, and those of us, including City Manager Mack, have active kids, young kids, and they are busy, 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 and being involved. And I'm sure she's getting messages as I am during a meeting, when you're coming home, when you're making dinner, and those are just the basic things that we, and I wouldn't have any idea if I was a mother what that commitment is, because that's a multitasking craziness that a guy will never understand. But that is a real valid point. I've just often wondered over the last few months, where are the ladies at running for city council? In time, and hey, 4 o'clock meetings, if we can get out of here at a decent time, I like that idea. If we're out of here at 5:30, but dinner bells are calling now. It's 6:08, so I'll shut my mouth.
Councilman Danforth?
Thank you, Mayor. And Councilman Peters, you're going to be surprised at this, but I agree with you. But here's the one thing I think that, and I'm looking back over the last 2 years, really, because that's really been the change since we moved to the city manager form of government. Got a new mayor, got a lot of different people on here. And I look back at many of the work sessions that we've had, and the ones that have, not sure the word, I got to be nice now. The ones that haven't been as productive but have been long, and then that transcends into our council meetings, which in turn are long with a lot of discussion, have been on controversial issues where we as a council have not reached a consensus among us. We've spent more time trying to reach a consensus in those meetings, Mayor, than we have the exchange of information to get us to a point of making a decision. And so what happens is we're so busy debating within those meetings, which part of that's healthy, we're not coming out of there with any direction, any definitive feeling on our direction. The two that I really look at that we've had discussions and it gets into council and it just kind of regurgitates itself is the CL zoning and City Hall. I mean, City Hall has, look where we're at with that, right? Those two issues have been really the toughest ones within our work sessions and back into staff and back into our council meetings. So beyond that, when we've had discussion about policy or some other things that maybe aren't as, I'm going to use the word controversial, I'm not sure that's the right word or not, but where we're not in agreement, they've been productive. They have. And I do agree. I don't like to meet for the sake of meeting. If there's a better way or a different way to do it, I'm a discerner. Amanda.
Color me surprised.
Thank you. But I am. So those are important to me. The ability to learn and to understand what we're going to be doing and why we're doing it in our council meetings is important. Most of that today, though, I'm able to handle that via questions, unless they're, I think for the most part, I think we know when the hot topics are coming. For the most part. That doesn't mean we aren't going to have discussion on things, but I think we know the hot topics, and those are the ones that I think really deserve our work session attention. And I think we know those are coming well in advance. I don't think, personally, with rare occasion, I don't think we need 2 work sessions a month. I think one should suffice. I'd rather have, personally, one longer one and be done with it than I would to have to create another night in my schedule. Because I will tell you, we also get not only young people, but we also get older people that are retired, and we travel if we can and when we can, and that usually encompasses weekends. And so now, if I've got every Monday I got to be here, what you're going to see is an empty chair here a number of times. And because that was one of the things that years ago that was brought up about maybe switching to Tuesdays, which, Lynn, I'm glad you brought up the sports, because that's absolutely correct. It's a big issue. But it was because Friday, what you're doing is you're tying the weekend up for somebody to be gone. Granted, they might leave Friday, but maybe they don't come back till Monday, or maybe they get back Tuesday. So that was where that started years ago, was how could we increase attendance? Because attendance used to be way worse than where we're at now. I mean, it was almost embarrassing at times how poor it was. So that's improved, I think, because not only attention here, but within the public as well. So I'm cool with it staying with Mondays. I would hesitate on the automatic adding of a fourth meeting date. I would rather have it not planned and then come as a special meeting versus always having to tie. Because I will promise you, if we're going to plan those dates, then I have to, because I am committed to being in this chair, then any plans that I or my wife or family have, or business-wise as well, now my hands are tied because I want to be here on Mondays. So now I'm automatically not going to try to schedule those dates. So now we're asking 4 days coming off of weekends every month. And that's where I'm at. I just think if we need them, fine. But I think they should be extra and not planned. Otherwise, I got to plan for them.
Councilman Schutte, did you want to add on to this? Because I would like to address some of the issues that Councilman Danforth has said, but if your comments are pertaining to what he just said, then I would allow it, but otherwise I would ask you to just wait for a second until we get an answer. Okay, then go ahead, Councilman.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Just to validate some of the comments made tonight with others here. Coming to tonight's meeting, you'd mentioned, Councilman Danforth, about the work session, coming here, having a debate on our position versus just getting the questions answered and getting the right information needed. And that's a good reminder, because personally, too, I try to bring that approach, even on the nights we vote. I try to bring that approach of being open-minded. Well, I want to be able to hear all the information needed to be able to make the right decision. Where these work sessions, especially on some of these topics, if they really can be set up more where it's literally just, which I believe that's what we're trying to do. But personally, we can come in here with a bent, and trying to word things or whatever to communicate things the way we want it to go. Like tonight here, I came here with an openness, even though I wasn't sure how far to drop the renewal fees. I was listening to people speaking. I was writing down some notes and taking in some answers to questions, asking questions myself, but without trying to not be like bent a certain way and making it a debate. So that's a good point that Councilman Danforth made, that the work sessions, make sure we keep them as just getting information so we can make a better decision. So I just wanted to just comment on that point, and I have one more question for comment or question, I suppose, for Councilman Jurens. What's for dinner?
And I'll still keep it open for discussion. And I don't want to speak for City Manager Mack, but I don't want to overlook, I don't want just the talk of a fourth meeting to overlook what the city manager is trying to accomplish with the information flow chart, which is, I know a frustration that staff has expressed to me several times is that questions that councilmen have, or even the public that might bring it to a councilman, is not asked until just a very short time before a council meeting. And it puts staff in a difficult position sometimes because they're hearing a question for the first time, and it's not that they are trying to hide information, they just don't want to give an incomplete or inaccurate answer to a question that is very important that they just haven't had the time to research. And I know that that is part of what is trying to be accomplished here with the information chart and the other meeting, is to provide council the opportunity to ask the questions ahead of time so that the council meetings can be more about reaching that consensus. And I don't want to necessarily speak for you, City Manager Mack, but I know just from conversations that we've had, that is one of the things that I know you're trying to accomplish here.
Yes, you are exactly right. In your packet, and we handed it out at the retreat, is that flow chart. That's really what we're trying to get to, is how do we not only share information with council, but how do we get direction from the council and then disseminate that down through the ranks to the staff, who oftentimes are the ones that are doing the actual work of implementing whatever it is that we've gotten direction on. What this does is actually helps the staff considerably. And that might be a lot to ask of the elected officials to add another evening. But it helps our work process and our workflow so significantly that I think it's worth another meeting per month. Because while yes, you often do know the big items, right, that are coming, none of us can anticipate what might become a big item. I mean, we've had a handful of, well, not even a handful, more than that, items over the last 2.5 years that we've put on consent, right? That someone on this body has said, I don't think it should go there and I want to have a discussion about it. It could be a pretty light discussion. We've had items that have been on an agenda and we've gotten an email the day of, hey, I want to pull that because I don't think we're ready to talk about it. We haven't had a discussion about it. And so that might still happen in these new processes. We can't prevent all of that and nothing will ever be perfect. But our goal as staff is to try to anticipate your needs the best way that we can. And we think that this is the right model to do that. Now, if you say we're not going to have a fourth work session, that's fine. We'll figure it out. But you are creating a gap between the last meeting of the month, which would be the third Monday, and the first meeting of the month, which sometimes can be 3 weeks in between. So anyway, I've said all of the words already. I don't need to say anything more. Whatever you decide is what you decide. But our Public Works Director might have something to add.
Yeah, if I could, Mayor.
Director Von Eye?
Just for context, this was one of the initiatives talked about, of course, at the council retreat. You all got to meet some folks at the retreat that talked at depth about information flow and workflow and how the council's information that they obtain and also the information they disseminate down to the staff through the city manager should and always be interconnected and constantly flowing in a circular motion. And that's really what this is about. The one thing I wanted to point out, mainly from a public works standpoint, because we produce so many of the agenda items, is that this model, having a work session before every council meeting, if we were to do that, the reason this model works so well and why it's plugged in some communities is because we then shift our workflow schedules up an entire week. If we don't do this, and if we just have one work session a month, it's hard for us to plan at that one work session what the 2 meetings down the road will look like without shoving everything up way earlier than what we are now. But by pushing everything up at least a week, and I'm talking the formalities of public notices for planning commission items, public notices for bids, public notices for rezones, and things like that we have to follow statutory timelines against. That's a lot of what this has to do with is systematically putting that workflow at the staff level into place so that it's informing the council at that work session what exactly is coming on that next council meeting. It's a big component of this. It doesn't have to be, but it does help with that information flow quite dramatically.
Councilman Shetty?
Yeah, so just as you're speaking, thank you, Mr. Von Eye. These meetings are going to are recorded, correct? The work sessions, and so if there ever is, it doesn't happen much for me as far as going off somewhere for a weekend, but there have times when I went to go to Mesa or somewhere to see my parents. I'll look at the schedule and go, well, okay, let's see here. Here's an off Monday, and I'll see what I can do. If it is a work session week, I mean, if we were to miss a work, not to minimize, I like to make it to every work session, every council meeting. I prioritize that. That's my goal. But if I were to miss a work session, since it is information being gathered, I could watch the the rerun, right? And get the information that might help me. I might not be able to partake in the conversation if I'm not doing via Zoom, but I could still at least potentially hear and get all the information needed, even if I did schedule something to miss on that particular week, if it had to be done. So just clarifying that.
Any further comments? I am going to ask for the council to offer some guidance on whether or not you want that fourth meeting. I've had 3 people at least come forward and say no. I think possibly a fourth.
Mayor, I would make some kind of motion if you're looking for something.
Just a second, Councilman. I just want to be clear, because Councilman Shetty was asking me a question on the side, saying just because we schedule it doesn't mean we're actually going to do that. But that actually does go back to a question that I asked City Manager at the beginning. No, the intent would be if it's scheduled, we will have it. So if we're voting for this, we are planning on having 4 meetings a month. I think that is the intent. Councilman Danforth?
Yeah, I will support. I'll support what the balance of here, but I do understand, Amanda and Heath. I understand where you're coming from, and I do recall that discussion. I'll support, whatever direction we go. As Councilman Shetty has mentioned, we can watch the reruns, but we're, with technology, we're also, a Zoom away or whatever we call it when we call in. So I can support what is in the best interest for the most effective communication between staff and council in our preparedness for our council meetings. So there might be times you can't make it. Well, that happens now to some extent. So I'm okay with it, just throwing up the red flag for discussion. So that's where I'm at, Mayor. I'm okay. If that's what staff feels is the best direction for us, then I'm with that.
Councilman Peters, did you want to say something?
I guess all comments well received. I would still lean towards keeping just one work session a month and beefing that up, so to speak, and then leaving the fourth as needed instead of having it on the calendar month after month for all the reasons we've discussed tonight.
Councilman Shetty?
There probably isn't a wrong answer to this, whichever way direction some feel. However, personally for me, just to follow kind of what City Manager Mack and others in the city for a better flow, for the betterment of the city and the flow of information, I would be for adding it to the calendar, just based off their desire for us to function better within our government agency.
Councilman Tupper?
I don't know how many times I always try to look at the agenda about as soon as I can find it online, and I think about it over the weekend and try to come up with any questions I have ahead of time for the staff. But I don't know how many times I've been at a meeting and I've thought, God, why didn't I think about that over the weekend? So now I put them into a situation where they may not have the adequate answers for me, and I'm still going to ask it, but I believe by having the fourth one that communication is going to be a lot smoother. The questions I have for any of the staff is going to be put out right there and then, so they can come to the meeting, be more prepared, and when they come to the meeting being more prepared, we can be more prepared to be more efficient, I think. And not only that, but not feel that we made a decision without not having all the correct information. So I think for the betterment of the community, I would go along with all 4 of them, so.
City Manager Mack?
I would also just comment that if it's not working, we can change it. I mean, that's, it's new, it'd be a little different, and it's certainly different on the staff side, the way we do our department head meetings and prepare agenda items. Like Heath mentioned, we're moving everything up a week from where we're currently at. So it certainly is requiring some changes on our part. But if we decide it's not working and it's not meeting its intended goals, I'll give you your 4th Monday back, I promise.
All right, any other comments? I just want to end with a comment that if we move forward with this as it is, I am going to stick with my comments from earlier, which is I am going to run the information sessions or these work sessions different than I have tonight. No public comment, no official actions, because that's not, in my mind, that's not appropriate to Robert's rules, is to take action in a work session. Now, I know staff wants direction, but I do not think it's appropriate to have an official vote at a work session. And then it's also protects the integrity of an actual council meeting, because if you're at a work session and you want to, if you're thinking that you want to make a motion, like I'm going to use this as an example. So if a councilman thinks about this for the next few days and comes to next Monday night and says, you know what, I actually don't want a fourth meeting, so I'm going to make a motion to change this, then that is where we are actually taking the motion, and that is where it is appropriate to do so. So with that said, I'm not even going to ask for direction. We're just moving on. That's an example of how we are going to have to work it going forward if this is how we are going to do it. Contractor work hours.
Before we
Yeah,
move on
go-
to that real quickly, but part of the goal of work sessions is to give direction to staff. And whether that comes through a motion or you all nod your heads or you give a thumbs up, we can't just leave it with a, okay, we'll talk about it next week, because then that defeats the purpose.
Well, but then, okay, but City Manager Mack, I would counter that the public is going to catch on to this right away and realize that they're going to have to be here for every work session, because if that's where direction is given for the next Monday night, the time to deal something is when you're actually making a motion. I mean, they can provide information.
So, yeah, I mean, decisions get discussed, hello, fire department, at a work session. So people who want to be engaged in that discussion are going to have to come to a work session, whether it's once a month or twice a month. But giving staff direction is not negating what happens at an actual council meeting. Otherwise, how do we get direction? I mean, how do we know that you want us to move forward with contractor work hours or with the, I mean, I guess the way I think about it is if you don't want to have discussions in work sessions, then our council meetings are going to be 4 and 5 hours, because we're going to be having this airport recodification discussion during a council meeting, and you all are going to vote yay or nay. Yeah, we like these changes. No, we don't.
I guess I would be better off if we were more prudent upon what to discuss. Medical cannabis would be an example of something that we took an official vote tonight on it, on something that could have been handled at a city council meeting. There was nothing inappropriate. I don't think that there was necessarily anything that was asked today that would not have been asked on Monday night. However, as far as like contractor work hours, some other things, I like the idea of having the presentations that sometimes take up council time. And then, again, as you said, leave the integrity of the council session to the official actions.
But in action, I guess maybe we're saying the same thing and thinking about it differently. In motion to direct staff is not the same as saying, I move to approve a $5,000 renewal fee. That is the action that you'll be taking on Monday. The action you took tonight was to direct staff because it was split. So you took a vote to show, hey, a majority of us want you to come to the meeting with a $5,000 renewal fee in the resolution. At that time, you can decide if it's $5,000, $6,000, $25,000. And when you make that decision, that's what goes into effect. The action you took tonight does not mean that in 2024, their renewal fee is $5,000. It was to tell staff, bring us a resolution with this in here, and then we will make the decision if that's where it's staying or not. You have to give us direction, or we just spin our wheels collectively.
And
you all passed a policy that said that you would give direction to the city manager through formal action.
So I'll go to Councilman Danforth in just a moment, but maybe we are, and we can talk about this more, but since you're using the medical cannabis direction, that vote should have been at a council meeting because we just voted collectively at a work session to move it forward with a $5,000 renewal fee, and I can pretty much guarantee you that that is going to be how the vote takes place on Monday night. So I understand it was supposed to be an informal vote, but there is nothing that was done today that could not have been done on medical cannabis at a council session. That's just a comment. Councilman Danforth?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I agree with you. Personally, I really appreciate the discussion we had on that. I really do. The thought on this side of the table, the input on that side of the table, I thought was very, very important. I think good information exchanged. But the direction that we gave, let's just say we didn't do that tonight. And it came with the $25,000 on there. Based on the discussion that we have here tonight on the cannabis issue, we would have had a discussion about lowering it, and we would have made a recommendation for the change, and then we would have voted on it. I agree with you that there's the highest probability that the vote that we took tonight informally for giving direction is going to be the same outcome as Monday, next Monday. So in that scenario, I think, Amanda, there's a difference in
City Manager.
City Manager Mac. I think there's a difference in given direction at a higher level that, gee, we want a whatever it is, you know. I think that's different than a specific point of what should be in there that we like in this case, a fee amount. If we wanted some other procedural or language changes, I think that's the direction that we would give. But to have a specific point of discussion, which is the whole topic of that discussion, and then give staff direction, it wouldn't have mattered one way or the other than the fact we kind of took an informal vote in here. So I agree with you, Mayor. I think I think we can accomplish direction to staff on appropriate issues. That doesn't necessarily require us to take a vote on certain items in certain ways to get there. I think they're separate issues, I do believe.
Councilman Shetty?
Thank you, Mayor. And this is just for me to help clarify with Robert's Rules of Order, correct? In how we're running our business here. It takes, what, two councilmen to put something on the agenda. So just hindsight with, for example, this topic A on the agenda tonight could have been done in a way where just after listening to the conversation and two councilmen say, hey, yep, let's put this on the agenda. Do we need to go the whole route we did with the vote? And just for certain topics like this, just listening to the information, do we need, a majority, or do we just need two councilmen to say, after hearing everything at this work session, I do believe this should be on the next agenda? Wouldn't that properly work this out without having to take a vote on a, like we did this evening, for example? You just need two people to say, hey, I want this on the agenda. And then we can properly discuss this more with the public, maybe more paying attention at the actual meeting itself, where the work session is just to kind of help get it on the radar. And yeah, this is something worth talking about. Okay, we just need two of you to say, let's put it on the agenda, and then we'll, debate it more. Just my thoughts are how that works properly.
All right. Councilman Peters, I haven't seen you say anything. Do you need to say anything?
No, I'm good, Mayor, but thanks for thinking of me.
Okay. And City Manager, you can say something after I'm done. I don't think that well, maybe some are in disagreement to have a fourth meeting every month, but I want to stress one thing to the council, or a couple different things to the council, that this is staff asking for better communication. We need to do our part. and getting those questions to them at a better rate. And that does mean, attending all of our meetings and looking ahead and working with the staff on that. So that's one of the most important thing is the information flow. I just want to say that going forward, and we will work together to make sure that this doesn't happen. Tonight was a really good example of what I want to avoid with the work sessions. Monday night, in all probability, we are going to have a 5-minute discussion on medical cannabis renewal fees, and then we are going to vote for it. Likewise, the CIP plan is probably going to have maybe a 5 or 10-minute hearing, and then we're going to vote for it. That is not what we want work sessions to be, is to completely take away the dialogue and the integrity of a council meeting. That's just what I want to avoid and just go on it, because otherwise I'm going to have to, and as I said early, I will treat this just like an official council meeting if this is how it's going to happen. So there just has to be an understanding on the council and on the staff of what we're going to accomplish and how. So but we can work together on this to figure something out. Are we ready for contractor work hours now? Contractor work hours. Are we going to our city manager?
Here's where we need some direction, because we've had a request from a couple of people to amend our subdivision regulations and the way that we monitor and work with contractors who are not working on city projects related to the hours that they work. There's been some complaints about work happening early in the morning or late in the evening. And frankly, I've had one council person who is pretty adamant that we need to put some parameters around contractors, and I've had another who has said, heck no, that's a private business, we shouldn't be meddling in it. So I don't know what to do. So this is where we're looking for some guidance. Do you want us to bring to you some proposals to impose contractor work hours? And part of why this discussion is important about giving direction is if the council says, yes, we want you to work on this, it takes staff time. And it takes away from other things, which is fine. We're happy to do that. That's our job. But everything can't be a priority if everything is a priority. And that's what we're really trying to get to, is what is a priority for you all? Is contractor work hours a priority? Because if it is, it's priority in our work plan, and we're going to bring you some proposals. That was you said I could finish before you moved on to the next thing. So there, I was finishing. Now moving on to contractor work hours in real life.
Just have to get that dig in there, okay.
No, it wasn't a dig. It's this is why it's important, because frankly, you all have differing opinions, and I don't want to send staff down a path of spending time and effort on this if it's not something that you want us to be spending time and effort on. So with that, I will turn it over to our Public Works Director to talk specifically about contractor work hours.
Yes, thank you, Manager Mack. Thank you, Mayor. The general summary I'll give on this, based on some of the complaints we've received recently, they were more related to private development contractors that are working in the field, all hours of the daytime, generally speaking, early morning to late in the evening. Currently, aside from some noise nuisance laws that the police department can enforce, we don't specifically address contractor work hours in our city ordinances. I've seen where communities specifically call them out and say in their ordinances that contractors, whether working for the city or for the private sector, shall only work between these hours. Whatever that might be, depending on the city you're in. The previous city I recently worked at, actually, they did do that. They called them out specifically in their contract documents and the contracts that they had with contractors for their city projects, and then also called them out in their subdivision regulations for any developers, contractors to have to abide by. So what I would propose is, if the council's interested in limiting contractor work hours, we could bring forth a draft ordinance amendment to Chapter 24, the subdivision regulations. And in Chapter 24, we would talk about private development contractor hours, and just simply write in paragraph regarding how they should be limited to be within daylight hours or whatever, the council deems appropriate. And then for the city's contracts, we currently have language in all of our contract documents. They're called the general conditions of the contract that we have with every contractor we enter into work agreements with. And in those general conditions, we say that contractors shall work reasonable times that are generally defined as daylight hours of the day, including Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. Any work outside those reasonable times shall not occur without express permission of the engineer, is how our city contracts are worded. So again, it's not specific. It doesn't say 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. It doesn't say 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. It just says generally include the daylight hours of any day and don't abuse it. Any extra time needs to be expressly approved by the engineer. It works well. We've been able to hold some contractors accountable on our projects with that language. But it could be more specific too. It all depends on the direction this council wants to go. As far as staff's concerned, we don't receive a lot of complaints in either case, city projects or developer projects. On occasion we do, as we have recently received complaints about, in this case, it was a developer project. And that's all I've got is a summary, I guess.
Are you the deputy mayor?
Sorry.
Right, Brandon.
Councilman Danforth?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I'm just going to make an assumption here. We know what the rules are within our city contracts that we do as well. So when somebody's bidding, they know what those are. And there's all kinds of delays that can occur that might get an approval, might be rain or weather. I mean, we're very seasonal when we can get stuff done here, right? I am not an advocate for hamstringing our contractors. I can't do it because there's too many variables. I think what's going to happen if we do that, number one, we all know what's happened to costs. We all know what's happened to labor. I believe what's going to end up happening at some point is you're just going to drive the cost up on these private projects. I don't believe it's a big enough issue. Now, that's easy to say, for me to say that because I didn't have equipment working right next door or 200, 300, 400 yards away. But I guess I look at it and I say, we should have, the two issues are, because part of this, in my opinion, the recent issue that we've got, the very vocal complaint that we got, is really more a matter of principle on this whole issue of this development than it is anything else. And granted, I understand the whole lights thing, the whole noise thing, but do we have the ability to measure and do we have rules on light emission and noise levels that are already in our ordinances, I believe? And can't we use that as our measuring stick? Because then are we going to say, well, you know what, I'm having a family gathering and I don't want them working Saturdays and Sundays either. Well, we're in my backyard and I can't hear a thing. Where do we stop that? I am not in favor of it. There's too many things that are involved. I don't believe, when we look at it, I don't believe aggregately within our community this is a big issue. I think we're trying to fix something that is a very sparse problem, problematic when it happens, but it really isn't a big issue. I'm talking about aggregate. It may be for a person or a neighborhood for a period of time, but as a whole, I think we're trying to fix a problem that really is pretty minor, all things considered.
Councilman Peters?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilman Danforth and Councilman Tupper and I had a great discussion about this in our meeting with City Manager Mack a few weeks ago. This is actually stemming from, well, partially some feedback that I got during the construction of the Plains Apartments north of back roads there. After a long discussion, I tend to agree with Councilman Danforth. I think that it's extremely hard for us to put in policy, you know, what the hours are and then expect our law enforcement officers to enforce that. However, my question would be, you know, what happens now if there is a complaint? Because I had a constituent reach out and ask about, you know, I think they were shingling, doesn't matter. They were up early in the summer to beat the heat and getting the work done, but that hour was pretty early. And so right now, I believe the process was they could file a complaint through the police department or something like that. I guess I'm wondering, if I'm that constituent, you know, what recourse do I have? Does that mean the law enforcement officers go out there and have a discussion with them? You know, I'm not saying that any fines should be, you know, placed or paid or anything like that, but what is the process right now if there is somebody that's working too early or too late? And too early and too late could be up for discussion.
Director Von Eyde, do you want to take that?
I can partially address that. So on city contracts, and I know you didn't ask that question, Councilman Peters, but on city contracts, we do, if we do get questioned on those, we go back to the contractual language and hold the contractor accountable to that and make sure that they are working in appropriate daylight hours, which can be very early in the morning in the summer months, obviously, as the sun comes up a lot earlier then, and long into the evening as well, given the long summer days that we have. We do, I think, have that language written that way in our construction contracts because, as you know, looking at the long-range capital plan, we've got a lot of work to do every year. In order to get it done, we've got to take advantage of those daylight hours, and so I believe that's why our current construction spec is written the way that it is. Now, going into residential areas and development, Chief Toomey's here. I'd maybe call on him if he wants to chime in, but those complaints typically do get passed on to them because the only mechanism we have in our ordinance is the noise ordinance. We generally refer to it as. Chief Toomey might know exactly what section that is. I do not, but that's generally where they administer the noise ordinance for the city, and he can follow up what that process looks like.
Hi. Yeah. So when we get those calls, and we do get them occasionally, we'll go over and try and mediate first. And a lot of times it's just knowing what the schedule is and when it's going to be done. So we have never received a signed complaint for construction, but that's what it would be. It would be a signed complaint for disorderly conduct. And we would issue the ticket, and then they'd have to go to court, and both sides of the story would be told in front of a judge. That's really our only recourse, is disorderly conduct.
Councilman Tupper?
Kind of a strange way of putting it, but I want to thank Councilman Danforth here, and we're talking about noise and lights. Well, Councilman Danforth lives right at the edge of town. So I'm sure there's been more than once there's been a combine or a tractor out planting or something like that, or after dark. So I guess what the point I'm trying to get at is this: where do we draw the line? You know, I mean, commerce has to proceed. So where do we draw the line? I mean, we could tell every semi that they can't come through town after dark until early in the morning because they make too much noise.
Chief, you can answer it if you have a great question or a great answer. But.
Yeah, I have no idea. We have to build, right? We have to grow as a community. So, I mean, unfortunately, that means noise. And we all know contractors are busy, and sometimes they have to be there at 3 o'clock in the morning to get their concrete poured or whatever it is. So we try and work those situations out, let the complainant know it's a temporary thing, and just, we know it's difficult, but we're growing as a city.
Councilman Jurgens?
I'll add on to Councilman Tupper's comment. You can run your trucks through town any time of the day. Just shut the Jake brake off out on 212. Anyway, the government oversight here really seems to get blurry and messy right away. especially on when we hear words like we occasionally get complaints, especially also knowing that there's a disorderly conduct. I mean, if it's going to happen multi-nights in a row or multi 5 a.m.s or 4 a.m.s or whatever, but this, I don't know, I have received no complaints from constituents. I'm sure we will now. But it is hard to get people to come to this town and to be in the contractor and the construction business the way it is, and then we're going to start throwing more, variables on top of that. It's like, oh my, I am completely against this right now. Someone can, reach out to me if they think that's a.
Mayor, it would be the operator, the one making the noise, that would get the ticket. So the people out there being told to run the Bobcat or whatever it is the one who would get the ticket. And, so we're kind of punishing people for working.
Councilman Shadid?
Yeah, I just want to make sure, just using an example, as we're trying to come up with some examples, would a contractor that does a snow removal business, does that fit this bill too? So they wouldn't be able to run their snow blowing? Did I say snow? Yeah, their snow blowing business, where they would be able to have to quit at dark or can't wait, they got to wait till the sun comes up. Does that fit this, or is that a contractor you're talking about as well, or?
Well, that's a unique scenario that definitely comes into the discussion. And jokingly, there's a public facility nearby my house, and I swear it's the first parking lot in the city to be cleared out every snow event early in the morning, and I get to hear those backup alarms on their payloaders. So, but I've never called Chief Toomey on that in that instance. But those are exact scenarios that definitely impact people when those machines are working around their houses. And we all know that snow removal happens best early in the morning or late at night when the traffic's not around. So that would be one exception to the rule, perhaps, if we do establish any more rules. But definitely comes into play.
Councilman Peters?
Yeah, I just had a quick follow-up on Chief Toomey's comments from earlier. If somebody wanted to file a complaint, and it sounds like that would be the best avenue for them, could they keep it anonymous, or do they have to put their name on it?
Nope, they have to put their name on it. They have to actually sign a complaint against the individual. They can call us anonymously, and we can go out and try and mediate the situation. But if they want official action, we have to identify them.
Councilman Peters, you're still recognized. Do you have a follow-up?
No, that's clarity I needed. Thank you. I agree. I think this is government overreach. I think that what we're doing now is just fine, but good discussion for anybody that brings it up in the future.
Councilman Danforth?
And there's no question, and I know that it can be an annoyance. I mean, and I'm not belittling that and the concerns that individuals have. I'm not. But every one of these cases, it's pretty short-lived. I mean, it is, especially in the residential areas. Now, there might be some exceptions, but I really wonder if the people that have those concerns, if they were building a house and somehow it got way behind schedule, if they would want those contractors to be working their tails off extra hours, whatever it is, to get it done. I think they would. They want it done as soon as possible, typically, as do businesses that need to get it done. So I think we're stepping into some water here that we don't want to step in. And I think we need to leave it alone. We need to deal with the issues. The question I have maybe of Chief Toomey is, if we have light and noise ordinances, that they aren't, what do they want to use? They aren't exceeding those, so they're in compliance. How do we give them a, what did you call it,
Disorderly conduct. We do not have a light noise ordinance. Only in
have a noise ordinance?
No.
Yes.
Only in industrial.
Only in industrial areas?
Yep. That's why the vehicle driving around with their stereo up at Mach 10 really takes some.
Talk to you about that.
I know, that's a good topic. They were for that fourth working session.
Okay, I thought the noise level was anywhere.
Nope, it's all under disorderly conduct. If it annoys an individual, they can sign a complaint. It's just like a barking dog. Well, I guess that's a different ordinance, but
Okay,
Yeah, disorderly conduct.
all right.
All right, I don't think that there's the will to mess with this. Moving on, E, airport ordinance recodification. We will go to our city attorney for this. Fly the friendly skies.
Okay, well, what I like about work sessions is a little bit more casual conversation about what it is you like, you don't like, or more information you need, or something that you would like addressed in an ordinance. So ordinances are really good for work session before adoption, so we don't have, 3 first readings of an ordinance. This one is actually kind of simple, although it had a lot of red lines, so you guys are probably like, what the heck? We met in August, the city manager, the airport manager, public works director, and myself, on Title I, on the airport. And when we went through it, we realized that a lot of the stuff that, that being a legal term, stuff, that was in the ordinance is really meant for a rules and regulations handbook or minimum standards of the airport. I did meet with the airport board, and they were also in favor of basically slimming down the airport ordinance, which, as we know, is supposed to be more of an overarching document, and then putting a lot of the details into minimum standards of the airport. They had already put together a draft. We are going through it now of those minimum standards, standard operating procedures, whatever they end up calling them. Those will be presented to council right around the time that we submit the recodification for council's approval, so that they're already in place at the time that you're slimming the airport ordinance. So you should have a clean copy as well as a red line. But going through it briefly here, because I have 20 minutes on my chart. So we're going to see if we can, so let's see, 6:59, here we go. So Chapter 101 is actually the redefinition of the airport, and that is because it got replatted when we built the new airport, and so now it is Lot 1, Watertown Airport First Subdivision. Going on to 1.02, this was originally traffic rules, ramp rules, really started getting down into how many feet and which way the wind was going. And instead, we went through it, and in looking at some other communities, we decided on some general rules of just the operator's conduct on airport property. So if you go down through the red lines, then you just get to all the different things that, what I call common sense things if I had an airplane. Look, make sure you're not crossing in front of another airplane when you're crossing the runway. Landing and takeoff. If it's at night, have some lights. I mean, pretty basic stuff. Then just to cover everything, 1.0203 is the what we actually have to abide by anyway, and is in all of our contracts and leases with vendors and operators, is following the Federal Aviation Administration's laws, rules, and regulations. So there's the catch-all there in 1.0203. Vehicle operation on the airport. We did talk about this a little bit at the board meeting, airport board. Because motor vehicles that are on what I'm going to call the tarmac or on the line, they should be getting permits and special permission from the airport manager. And then we also put general just parking further down in 1.0302. And the reason we left this in here was because I think it'll be simpler for the police department to be able to continue to cite tickets and that sort of thing when there's violations. Then we added 1.04, which is use of airport facilities. We kept it simple. Basically, you can't do business at the airport unless you have an agreement with the city. And that is done through recommendations by the airport board and final approval by the city council. That's also in conjunction with state statute. We also put in a discrimination clause. Originally, non-discrimination was kind of peppered throughout the entire ordinance, and now we just basically said, don't discriminate. One of the reasons we left it in the ordinance is because usually when we're applying for federal grants and things like that at the airport, they require that you have those things in your leases and in your ordinances, so we left it in. Let's see here. This 1 point,
Councilman Shetty?
yes.
Quick question. With the restaurant there, right? Is that different as far as doing business? You know, two people having lunch and doing a business transaction, they're talking about whatever over coffee, over a slice of pizza?
Right. Good question. So there are operators business, and then there is what they call non-aeronautical business done at the airport, which would be your Dempsey's situation where they're out there, rental car. Their agreements are slightly different than an operator's, but they still require multiple federal regulations from the Aviation Administration to be in those leases. And so those will be in the guidelines that the airport board will bring to you for approval. That way too, if the federal regulations change in any way, we don't have to redo our ordinance. It will just be a new, they'll probably be updating the regulations, I would guess, once a year, or once every other year, depending on. And I do apologize, the airport manager did want to be here, but he was short-staffed, so he had to handle the incoming flights tonight, so. And as you can see here, we kind of deleted on this 1.4, so when you were talking about commercial business other than aeronautical services, we struck that just because in the beginning, we have that any business at the airport has to have a lease or agreement of some kind. So we took out aircraft sales, that will be in some guidelines, all of this insurance requirements, aircraft rental, again, insurance requirements, personnel requirements, building requirements, all of this stuff should be in guidelines and minimum standards and not in our ordinance.
City Attorney Carrico, have you moved on, I mean, back in 1.0402? So there's a lot struck, but I'll just say where you go, so I'm going from section 1, promotion and accommodation of air commerce and shall be operated as, and then it skips right away. So it goes, shall be operated as public air terminal. Do you want an?
Are you looking at the clean or the red line?
Okay, where?
And I apologize, I should have numbered the pages so we could find stuff easier. This was not fun.
Okay, yeah, it's teeny tiny in there.
So we're good?
Yep.
Okay. Doo-doo-doo. So we took all this stuff out. It will all be addressed in some way in our minimum standards. I know I'm kind of interchanging words. It just kind of depends on what the board decides to recommend calling it. Yes, sorry, City Manager Mack.
You know what? I'll reserve my comment for.
Okay. However, what I want to take you down, since most of this is all strikeout, is to 1.05, the airport board. So one of the things we talked about in our work group was creating some consistency in the ordinances when in relation to boards. So some of the changes and the flow and the way this is organized in 1.05 is similar to the Park and Rec Board, which was previously approved by the council. So basically, we're establishing the Watertown Regional Airport Advisory Board. One of the things that came up was when talking with the board, and I wanted to throw it out there to you guys, was right now we have that there's 5 members of the board and they have to reside within 35 miles of the Watertown Regional Airport. Our current ordinance has that 3 members must be residents, well, actually landholders and residents of the city. But in our Park and Rec ordinance, we did get rid of the electors. However, the board was basically stating that I think as of right now, they actually don't have 3 members that are residents of the, that live within the city limits. They want to have just the 35-mile radius.
I'm sorry.
And I'm thinking, though, that this,
Wants the council to make that change?
right, they do not want the 3 members must be, I think they were thinking that it had to be landowners because they talked about having land outside the city limits. But basically, they did not want that second this right here, this whole sentence right here. Or the other option, if we're trying to make lemonade, not that we should be making lemonade in our ordinances, would be to at least say 1 member or 2 members, or lower the amount of members that have to be residents of the city. But I don't know if they're thinking that if they live in the county, but they're still in the city, you know, their address is still Watertown, that they're not residents of the city. But I'm assuming they're talking about voting, right? And so they're not within city limits for the purposes of voting.
But it's a 5-member board, right?
Yep.
Councilman Danforth?
They brought it up. And I'm asking.
Just a couple thoughts on, and I'm not sure that I've heard this all exactly correct, but first of all, I'm going to do the landowner thing. So let's say my wife and I, we're just renting, we're leasing, and I have a plane, and I have a skill level, a skill set that is good with this board. I can't be on the board.
Originally, but I took out the electors part.
What's the electors mean?
Electors is the landowner.
So that's
Yep,
gone.
that's gone.
You don't have to do that.
Correct.
Maybe what we should do is if they must have the Watertown zip code. If Watertown is their city of zip residence, meaning zip code, to me, I would be fine with that personally.
Mr. Chairman,
Director?
if I could chime in from a staff standpoint. I'm guessing the logic on why 3 of the 5 members is required to be in the city limits is because it is a city-owned and operated facility. And why we allow 2 to be outside that boundary is because it is also a regional airport. Yet the majority of the board, because it is a city-owned and operated facility, at some point, I believe is probably why we felt it was appropriate to have a majority of the board members residing within the city limits and not outside the city limits. That's speculation on my part, but it makes sense from just from a staffing perspective on the input we obtained from that board. You know, ultimately, they are an advisory board to the city council, who are obviously all residents of the city. Whether you want that scope of influence or input from that board to creep further outside the city limits or not, I think is what it boils down to. But a speculation on my part is why that's written the way it is because it is a city-owned and operated facility.
Follow-up, Councilman?
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with that, but I guess I'm looking at it from an appropriateness and a common sense standpoint. It is a regional airport. I do understand that we have, 2 positions that could be outside of that. I'm really more concerned about having the right people on there than I'm in exactly where they're coming from, personally. And if that means that we have 3 people that are from outside the immediate city limits, but they're quote-unquote Watertown residents, meaning zip code-wise, if that's the right people, I'm all for having the right people on there. I don't know. I can't imagine what they would do, because it is purely advisory. I can't imagine what they would do that would be contrary to, because they live outside the city limits, that's be contrary to the taxpayers, because we have staff and we have this body that should be taking all of that into consideration. So that's my 2 cents. I really don't have a big problem with it. Heath, I agree with you. That's probably where that came from. And maybe there's those that believe that because taxpayers should be the ones on that, maybe in theory, but again, I go back to it. Let's get the best people on there.
Director Von Eye?
All great points, Councilman Danforth. I think the could be, what could be done is, I mean, that's the $1 million question right there. You know, what would a majority of the members in some point in the future, what could be done with some kind of an initiative or expectation or plan for the airport turn into or look like? That's the million-dollar question, I think. The other point I'd quickly make is, I wouldn't necessarily liken this to the planning commission, because they are making decisions that pertain to land within the city limits, but I would liken it to the park board. I mean, our zoo is open to the region. Anybody from outside of the city can come use the zoo. The park board members, I'm not even sure, but I assume they're all required to be citizens within the city. If not, maybe I stand corrected, but I'd liken it to that board as well, and whether or not that's opened up to outside the city limits or not.
For now, I presented it with getting rid of the landowner, and I think as long as we make clear that when we say within the city, it means zip code and not, city proper, I think we're good. Because we still have the 35-mile radius as well for those that,
Right, but-
and the 3.
But if I'm hearing Mr. Von Eye correctly, his suggestion is that we stay with the definition of the 3 and the 2, correct?
That would be my advice, but simply from the director's standpoint.
Right, but,
No, I'm saying just get rid of landowner.
okay, but then you said Watertown resident as relates to the zip code, and that's not what,
Right, because in our ordinance right now, we say residents of the city. We don't, there's other portions of our ordinances where we actually say city limits, like the proper. In other words, this does not say that they have to be voters of the city.
well, then there's got to be some
Clarification.
distinct clarification
Yes.
on that, because I think most people would read that as city residents, meaning taxpayers of the city of Watertown.
Agreed. So are we talking zip code or city limits proper? What are your thoughts, council?
Councilman Tupper, did you have something right on that one?
Yeah, zip code of Kransburg, South Dakota is 57201, so.
57245. Good one is 57238.
Well, maybe it's.
I hope you like that little bit of nerdiness.
I take my comment back, Mayor.
You know what? I'll surprise you guys and you guys can decide it at an official council meeting. We will be getting rid of 1.0504 unless council has a difference of opinion, which is the bond requirement. They actually aren't.
Yeah, I'm not sure if but, I mean, in regards to the residential issue, this is an example of, are we doing it under old work session guidelines and asking for council to,
No, I'm not asking, I'm seeking input and I've gotten silence other than Councilman Danforth unless somebody else has any comments about the residency requirement.
I think that the majority of the board should be Watertown residents. Councilman Shetty?
If the mayor's appointing it with the approval of the council, that's kind of a checks and balances, isn't it? As far as quality person involved, if they're from city limits or not from city limits. So there is that in play as well. However, because you'd think, oh, what happens if all 5 are from 10 miles north of Brookings, right? But at the same time, if we're appointing them through the mayor and through the council, that's the checks and balances to try to keep it in order, per se. So that's my thoughts as I'm kind of working through it.
That would be kind of my thought as well, that if we're going down the road where 4 members of the board are not living in Watertown, the council is probably going to raise a question and say, what are we doing here? Okay, I don't think that there's any guidance to change what you have.
Okay. Get rid of the bond requirement. Right now, they are not currently bonded. I don't think any of our boards are. I could be wrong, but I don't think any of them are. Yes.
Councilman Danforth?
Don't we have, I thought I heard this once, because this topic came up some time ago.
Okay.
And I thought there was something said at that time that the individuals on these boards and committees or whatever they are automatically covered under the city anyway versus a specific bond for an individual or a board. Is that
That would
correct?
make
So they're covered under our work comp, which is why when we have volunteers, we bring them to you for approval. So if they're volunteering at an event or, at airport specifically, we have a young man who volunteers out there and cleans tables and whatnot. But the bonding, I think, was probably in place when these boards had more financial authority than what they do now. I would say Park Board probably in the past would have had some similar language where they had spending authority, budgetary authority, because that provides another level of protection for the city when you have employees or board members in this respect to be bonded. So if something were to happen, the city would be made whole. But all of our board and committee members and volunteers are on the city's work comp insurance. So if something were to happen on city property, they would be covered.
To piggyback on City Manager Max, that would be correct, because in this ordinance as well with the airport, they had signatory authority, the board did, to execute contracts and things of that nature. And so during the time when it was not a city manager form of government, your boards had a lot more financial and power over contracting, which is, I'm assuming, why the bond requirement was in there.
So we're saying now it's not that they don't have it, it's that we don't need to have them have it. is
Correct.
What you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, and I would agree with that as an advisory position.
Kind of going along with how we did the Park and Rec Board, we designated a section for the airport manager, election of their officers in July. We got rid of the secretary requirement and put the minutes and record keeping on the department itself, so it's on the airport manager and his employees. Yes.
About the airport manager, I think a distinction between this and the Park and Rec Board. So the park ordinance calls for the city manager to appoint a Park and Rec director. The airport manager reports to the Public Works director.
Yes, and I
So
called
it
you that today, and I forgot to make the change,
Okay.
and I called you about it too. I was like, you don't appoint them, do you? Okay, so, hold on, I need to write this down. Okay. Election of the officers, like I said, let's see, we got rid of the powers and the signatory authority. Official meetings is versed it's the same way as the Park and Rec. The official records and reports, same thing. The airport manager maintains the minutes and submits the minutes to the city manager and copies to the finance officer. That is similar in the Park and Rec Board. And again, these powers and authorities in 509 and 510 were also similar to the Park Board in that they have the ability to draft and create rules and regulations for not only themselves, but for the operation of the airport with the approval of the city council. And then at the very end, this was more for, because since we're getting into the airport, it was a little more, we added an enforcement area, allowing the airport manager and the city police to enforce the rules and regs and the ordinances on airport property. And then we struck out the punishment. That was a recommendation by the Muni Code reviewers because we have Title 22. So that's where all the punishment stuff will go. And that is it. And look at that, 20 minutes.
21 minutes by my account. We will take that out of your pay.
Yeah, I
Council,
guess.
discussion. Council, anything? All right, we'll move on to discussion on 31st Street, MOU. Public Works Director Heath Von Eye.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Good job, Lisa. So 31st Street, this is the road on the east side of where the new ice arena is being built. It runs from Highway 212 all the way north to 3rd Avenue and then there's a 90-degree intersection there where 3rd Avenue then runs west over to 19th Street. But 31st Street's the part in question, and more specifically, there's a tributary there that flows into town and eventually hooks up with the Big Sioux River. And that area has some culverts that are currently in place to allow for the conveyance of that creek to run through there. They're a little bit undersized, and that area does receive some localized flooding and flood damage from time to time every few years. So currently, that roadway, for the most part, is under the jurisdiction of the Elmira Township. And Elmira Township's been in frequent conversations with the city over the years on helping maintain that road, which we've done what I would say a good fair part of assisting in maintaining that roadway, along with a couple of contractors that work out there. Dunnick's plant is located along the east side of 31st. And then J&J Earthworks and their subdivision, the Lakes at Willow Creek, is also located out there along 31st. And they both participated strongly, I'll say, in the past on helping keep that maintained as well. What this MOU is specifically about here tonight, as there is a larger conversation about 31st, but specifically what this MOU is about relates to the recent FEMA flood declaration for the spring of '23 for the flooding that occurred. And there are certain mitigation dollars available right now through FEMA. That location was put on our list of impairments that were damaged or received some damage in that flood from the spring of '23. And in our conversations with Elmira Township, it simply boils down to that if FEMA is to award them funding to help mitigate flood damages at that location, Elmira Township does not have the local match to afford taking on federal assistance to mitigate those culverts. The proper mitigation for that location would be to rebuild I think there's 3 culverts there right now, 3 separate corrugated metal pipe CMP culverts that exist. And to mitigate that, to prevent any future flooding damages, would be to put in some form of a larger box culvert. The initial estimates for that box culvert are about $1.3 million to have that installed. If FEMA deems that an appropriate mitigation measure under this declaration, they would cover roughly 70% of that cost. So then that then leaves right around $400,000 local match. That is the worst case, best case, depending on how you're looking at it. The best case scenario, if FEMA is saying, yes, we will partner with you, local jurisdictions, and improve this structure to help mitigate any future flooding. Worst case scenario, though, that's the highest amount we would have to spend locally. What the memorandum of understanding before the council is, or that we'd like to bring forward at the next meeting, is a summary that would state that we as a city would help Elmira Township cover the local costs. And as it's drafted, I believe, City Engineer Peterson's in the room, he could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe as it's drafted is we would cover 100% of the local match, simply because Elmira Township doesn't have many funds at all to throw towards this. From a staff standpoint, we would recommend going down that path because eventually that road 31st is going to be completely in the city's jurisdiction. So to leverage federal funding to help improve the current road situation, I think would be in the city's best interest in the long term. In the short term, it is in Elmira Township's jurisdiction. We could, wash our hands of this and not have anything to do with it. But because of that long-term vision or foresight here is why we're bringing it forward to council for consideration. And with that, I'll pause for any questions. And again, Peterson's in the room. He can help with addressing any questions the council might have.
All right. Any questions, comments, council? Councilman Tupper.
Every time I drive down that road to drive out and look at the ice arena, the progress on the ice, it scares me today. I mean, it does, because we know, although that's not going to be the designated route, to the ice arena, there's going to be a lot of people who use that. And as the more traffic we get, the worse it's going to get. And right now, there is no protection in going off that culvert into the river at any time. So it's, like I say, it's a kind of an accident waiting for a place to happen. So I would say anything that we can do to mitigate that in the future, and we may even want to look at something in the near future as far as that part goes, as far as the danger of the falling off the road. So,
Councilman Danforth?
Yeah. Director Von, when we talk about the flooding, are we talking about, which would be on the east side of the road? So is that, because it's the sizing of whatever culverts are there is not going to create downstream flooding, it's going to be upstream flooding. So it'd be on the east side of the road, which is in the Dunnick area, is that correct?
Yeah, currently the culverts are undersized for a larger storm event, and then the backup occurs on the east side of the culverts. And then the road eventually ends up overtopping, and we lose a lot of the surfacing material. A lot of the gravel gets washed away. And then it also compromises how well the subgrade material is packed around those culverts. Could be causing voids around them as well as the water washes over the roadway.
Is there a reason why we wouldn't go back to the similar type of structure that's there now versus the box culverts, which I was shocked at how much that was. Is there a reason why we wouldn't go back to the corrugated and just add more, whatever it is, so we have the capacity?
Yeah, that's a possibility. The problem you run into is the physical space that's available within the channel itself. Whether you can get another culvert or two in there and still be within the channel. When you put those box culverts in, it dramatically increases the flow capacity for the drainage channel. Because you're opening up all that space that's otherwise taken up by the backfill around each one of the culverts. You increase the volume and the capacity of flow quite substantially. So to do so, that's part of the engineering we would have to do with this, and that FEMA, of course, would help review and approve. But to install culverts that would equate to a box culvert flow, I don't believe is physically possible for those reasons.
Okay, Mayor, one more question, if I may. Is it fair to say, or if I'm interpreting this correctly, that the flood issues that would have occurred last spring creating the problem, so FEMA potentially providing the larger share of this, so it's kind of a one-time opportunity for us right now, right? Because of the flood? It's not like, gee, let's put it off in a year or two from now and it's all been dry, that we can still get that money. It's kind of a now or never thing?
Correct. It falls under, potentially, it falls under the eligibility of the current declaration that this portion of the state is under for the spring of '23. That's not to say that another event couldn't happen again in '27, and the same declaration is made, and the same location was damaged, and we could fall back into that scenario, but it's got to be under those conditions.
But we don't know if that could occur or will
Precisely,
occur. So
yep.
we kind of need to look at it now and say, here's the opportunity.
Yeah.
We should, it would appear like I'm with Mr. Tupper here. It looks like just for good planning on our part, I think we would need to do as is being suggested here, and that we support it.
And I would stress that FEMA has not made a formal determination that this location will receive funding, but if they do, that's when this MOU would kick in. We would then partner with the township to move forward with FEMA to mitigate through a proper project.
Councilman Shetty.
Yes, and I would agree with other comments here with that development that's going up out in that area. This would be a good phase one potentially to start getting that road in better shape. Another quick question though, is there wisdom in, if you're putting a culvert in, to at the very least concrete or something, you know, that area, instead of just being gravel right there to kind of get that spot concreted, you know, being that it doesn't get flooding, I guess, over the road, right? It's to the east the way it sounds, but somehow just to kind of even have that phase paved or concreted. I know low areas and some other, you know, just like the bike trails, we did use concrete in some areas that had more water, potential water issues. So is there any wisdom in adding to the project while they're there? Can we take advantage of, I guess, costs by being there already working on the culvert to just kind of design it for putting a road in right there in that spot at the very least and to add to it later on?
Yes, there's definitely merit in that, and I'm guessing that the cost estimate includes a concrete deck on top of that box culvert. Engineer Peterson's nodding his head in agreement, so yes, absolutely.
Any further comments, council? All right. We are moving on to future council items right ahead. City manager?
All right, thank you, Mayor. What you have in front of you is what we are anticipating that will be on the agenda for December 18th, the last council meeting of the year. So a lot of cleanup work before we close the year out. This is an opportunity for you to see it, first of all, and give some input if you have it right now. Otherwise, it gives you a whole week to be thinking ahead and preparing questions, or if you need more information, you can certainly reach out to us. But we will have the resolution, the fee resolution. We'll have the second reading of the budget supplement. We'll have the second reading of the ordinance amendment, taking the fee for cannabis establishments out of the ordinance and putting it into the fee resolution. We'll have the long-term plan. We have our health insurance renewals, our work comp renewals, the Humane Society contract. Chief Toomey and City Attorney Carrico and Mayor Holeen have been heavily involved with the Humane Society and bringing changes to that language. The rezone of the Mansell edition that was heard at the Plan Commission this last week. We have our union contracts, certificates of completion for a couple of subdivisions, a DOT land transfer that we'll talk to you all about, change order for the 23 street reconstruction project, first reading of the taxi ordinance. Lisa and crew have been working on some proposed amendments to that. We may have a strategic planning proposal for you to consider. We'll talk about that in our small group meetings tomorrow. Council calendar, 31st Street MOU, and then reassignment of the Lofts TIF to a new buyer. And I don't think I've missed anything, but maybe I have, if you all have anything else.
I think our city attorney might have something to add to this.
Go ahead. Naming rights for the ice arena. We may have some agreements that are ready to come forward.
Yes, we thought we'd, so the ICE group, I guess is what I would say, like being Scott Glow, myself, Gary Weckworth, we got a presentation from the architects on how the namings would actually look and where they would be placed within the building. So we can finalize some of those naming agreements with the donors. So we thought we'd actually have them show that presentation to you so you guys can see what it's going to look like. And then we'll line them up, all the lovely agreements for those, all in one shot. So hopefully we'll get most of them done by that Monday.
All right. Any questions on that, council?
You look tired, Councilman Danforth.
All right. Announcement, City Manager Mack.
I would like to turn it over to our Public Works Director. He has a couple of announcements, a new hire and a new promotion within the Public Works Department. Take it away.
Thank you, Manager Mack. Yes, Justin Peterson and Robert Dari, if you could please come forward to the podium.
It's time for the hazy.
Come on down.
First, an announcement of a promotion. As council, you're aware, we've been trying to hire another licensed engineer here at the city for, I haven't gone back and formally counted, but I believe it's somewhere close to 2 years now, where we've advertised for an entry-level PE. That means somebody that's been graduated with their engineering degree, worked 4 years, and took their license exam and passed. We weren't successful in receiving any qualified applications for that position. We then advanced it to try to hire a second assistant city engineer to see if that wouldn't draw some licensed engineers in in a management capacity. Again, we were not successful in that search as well. At that point, discussions ensued about my personal title transitioning from Public Works Director / City Engineer to Assistant City Manager / Public Works Director, and losing that city engineer title, which then led us to open up and seek out a new city engineer. After an exhaustive search, we did have some interest from outside, not a lot, and then some interest from inside. And through the interview process, it turns out we didn't have to search much further than through the wall of my office to find Justin Peterson. And he's since been offered and accepted the role as the city engineer after his 2.5, 3 years serving as assistant city engineer. So we just wanted to formally announce that and welcome Justin into that capacity as a city engineer. The staff reporting and the structure, nothing changes there. All the engineering staff had already been directly reporting to Justin as the assistant city engineer, so they'll continue to do so. His position will then still report to the Public Works Director, where before it was me reporting to myself as the city engineer, the Public Works Director. So Justin is one of the 6 division heads of Public Works. He'd be lateral from his new colleague Robert sitting next to him, along with the Community Development Manager Hanton, Airport Manager Cyrus, Street Superintendent Bainan, our new coming Solid Waste Superintendent, who will be here in the middle of January. Will all be part of that division head team to help lead the Public Works departments, the department and divisions. With that, next to Justin is Robert Dari. Robert, this is his first day with the city. We brought him here from Boise, Idaho. He's in that area where he had lived for quite some time and worked in the wastewater industry, and one of several out-of-state applicants that pursued the wastewater superintendent role here with the city. And he rose to the top through that process and was offered the position and accepted, and we're glad he's moved here with the city, and I'll hand it over to him to introduce himself any further to the council that he'd like to share.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Hello, my name's Robert Dari. I'm excited to be part of the Watertown team and look forward to helping lead the wastewater treatment facilities moving forward and keep it within permit compliance. So we're excited to be here and get to meet everybody. And so, yeah, anybody have any questions for me or?
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I love the outdoors, spending time with my kids. I have 5 children, so pretty busy.
What are their ages?
15's the oldest, 8's the youngest, so it's 15, 13. You put me on the spot here. 12, 10, and 8, so.
And their names?
Oh, man. I don't know if I can do that one. So, yeah, Julia, Anthony, Emily, Joshua, and Elizabeth. So, yeah, they're very good children. Love them to death, and we have a great time together. So, and my wife also too. So.
And her name is?
Jessica.
Nice. And I know that if you need some outdoor partner, we have a Public Works, our Parks and Rec director, who is an avid ice fisherman, at least, if not many other things. So I don't think that you'd have any shortage of finding people to enjoy the outdoors with. So
nice.
Councilman Schutte.
Yeah. Here's your first question from a councilman. So, on the wastewater division, for fees, it says sewer televising. I'm actually curious, what are we televising with our sewer? What does that mean? I was curious that earlier, but I'm like, maybe you can answer that. What is sewer televising?
Actually, I'm going to guess, I don't know for sure, but I'm going to say the CCTV of the sewer lines. But
Which means closed caption televising of the sewer lines. So when there are problems with the sewer system, we run a video camera up those and record that to figure out what's causing the issue. Sometimes it's tree roots or some kind of obstruction in the sewer mains. But you're right, the CCTV is, so somewhat universal language across state lines that we refer to those things.
Can we put that on a government channel? Is that, no?
No comment, Councilman.
Well, I'm going to make a comment. Dan, it's not them filming you using the bathroom. But I want to welcome you to town. I think it's great that we got a great state here, and we got a really good community here, and we work hard. We're not perfect, but we work as a good team, and we welcome you and your family. And I really hope that, I'm not sure which one's your kids, but we want somebody that's like 6'8" for our basketball team, because we have not a lot of height. So,
Robert, where are you from originally?
I grew up in South Florida, so moved to Arizona later on as a teenager, and then moved to Idaho and with my wife and 2 kids there, and that was 12 and a half years in Idaho, working for the city of Boise in the wastewater treatment division, and now I'm here. So.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
we're very happy to have you. So let's welcome him.
Thank you.
Sorry you had to wait 3 hours and 42 minutes to be introduced. We could have done that first, actually, had we thought about it. Director Von Eye?
Mayor, I feel remiss because we know Justin. We didn't offer him the same introduction.
Actually, Justin?
Tell us about curling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm an avid curler. Not really, but curling's a fun sport. I'm Justin Peterson. I'm married, have 4 kids, and I'm trying to remember their ages now.
Ages and names.
It's 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. So yeah.
We'll give you a pass.
Yeah.
That's not ages.
I know their ages. So my son just had a birthday last week, but yeah, I like working here, and I'm glad to continue on the city engineer. So.
All right. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Robert.
And I'm a man of many words.
Any other announcements? Any public comment? There's no reason to go into executive session tonight. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Danforth. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, the motion is to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Ms. Mack, before you ditch.
I'm gonna go eat spaghetti. What do you want?